Just type in Tiffany Ellis, like capital T, capital E, and then I'm gonna put in her bio, but for right now, just type in Tiffany Ellis once you go live.
It's quite a few of them. That's why I was asking.
So give the actual email, give her the information so she can know.
Just type in Tiffany Ellis, like capital T, capital E. I'm gonna put in her bio, but for right now, just type in Tiffany Ellis once you go live. If you type
It's quite a few of them. That's why I was asking.
Tiffany
So
Ellis,
give the actual
pop
email,
up live.
give her the information so she can know.
Just click on the little.
You're on YouTube. We can actually.
If you type
It's quite a few of them. That's why I was asking.
So give the actual email, give her the information so she can know. So what it looks like is it is
live.
lagging, right?
We're already live, yeah.
Okay, but it's lagging in the conversation, or is it?
Well, if Rika is watching it, I think we're just hearing her sound through Zoom.
Okay.
She has to mute it if she have to mute it and watch for comments, because if she listens to it, it's gonna be.
Yeah, so once she mute her phone, it'll be fine. We're just hearing her feedback.
Okay, because I was hearing it on my end as well. So can she still see everything going right now?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, perfect. Now let me do one more thing and then we'll get going. I'm so sorry about this. We tested it before, but you know how things happen, right? This is how it works. So we just pivot and adjust.
I'm also tell them to type in Tiffany Ellis and then click the little 3 buttons on the side.
Just go ahead and put it on my Instagram, baby, so they'll be able to find it because I'm not going to be able to do that, okay? All right, thank you, love. All right, so we're going to go ahead and get started. Thank you all for working through the technical difficulties with us. So welcome to the virtual connection. This is our first time taking the conversation to YouTube Live. And as you can tell, we are working through the kinks, but it's all good. No sweat, we'll figure it out. All the participants who are joining us tonight have voluntarily agreed to take part in the discussion, and understand this content is not going to be edited. So exactly as it is recorded is exactly as it's going to air, okay? I will let Mama Rika start with her run through, and then I'll give a word for myself, and then Shantae will also give a word. So Rika.
Hi, ladies. Again, happy Friday. So this is a safe space here. In your Zoom, you will see where it says participant. If you have any questions or you want to comment on something or chime in, you simply raise your hand. If you raise your hand, I can see it, and I'll let Tiffany know that you guys have a hand. I'll let Shantae know. If you don't have a question or you just kind of want to say something to get it off your mind, we also have the chat. The chat box is where you can put anything. And if you guys have already seen it, I said earlier, so you'll also see that. I'll also let you in and out. So I'm multitasking on the back end. Just for sake of this, can everybody who is new, who hasn't done virtual connection, because the OGs already know, can you go ahead and go to your participant and do a raise hand for me so I can make sure that everyone understood? Thanks, Krista. Felicia, thank you. Kira, thank you. Latia, thank you. Crystal, thank you. Fantastic. And I also can lower your hand. So once we've acknowledged you, you don't have to worry about removing yourself, so we can see that, okay? And of course, you guys should have seen, thanks to Wanda, thanks, Bo Black, and I believe that says beautiful.
Bo Black Girls. You probably saw Aries or Kim with Bo Black Girls.
I was like, look, Bo Black and beautiful. I like that.
Bo Black and beautiful.
So thank you, ladies, for all doing that. So therefore, you have the chat and you have a hand raised, and we'll keep monitoring you as we move along. Back to you, Tiffany.
Awesome. So Shantae, do you have any words you want to say to the ladies?
Hey, y'all. I am excited to be back for another week. I love me some virtual connection. I'm excited to have this conversation. As we know that this is going to be a heavy conversation, or it can be. The content of it is heavy, but I do want to make sure that you are aware of your body and you're aware of your emotions. And if something is triggering to you, just take a moment and pause, step away if you need to. At the end of the day, we want to make sure that everybody is good, but the conversation has to happen. And I'm excited to have it.
Yes, yes. So I just want to say, and we're going to get to introduce the ladies of the We Are Meaningful podcast shortly, but I just want to thank the Bold Black Girls podcast who have joined us tonight. I want to thank Kiara, because she also has a podcast, For Realness Sake. And then we have We Are Meaningful joining us as well. And you all have just been doing some amazing work. I know the courage it takes to have these courageous conversations on a weekly basis. So thank you for continuing to show up every single week and for providing content we can look to for guidance and for insight. And so that's just my message to you all. We're going to have a good time. It's going to be a good conversation. And even though we had our hiccups, I have my technical assistant over here to the side. He's working out some things and making some videos on the Instagram to notify all the people. Real quick, did you make a video? Just go on my story and make a video and tell them where to find the link.
This lady said she's having trouble, so I gotta go to the first link in the bottom.
Sounds good. All right. So I can't answer any more questions. Not really. Okay, cool. So we're gonna go ahead and jump into the conversation. Like Rika said, this is a safe space. So it's as safe as it can be for the internet, right? It is possible. You could have some folks who scroll across the streaming and see it. And maybe they'll have some things to say. It's okay. We respect everyone's feelings. I think that's a big part of what makes this event so special, right? So what is the virtual connection? So the virtual connection is basically an extension of POS and PR. And our goal is to normalize therapy, improve mental and emotional well-being, and increase emotional intelligence through actively engaging participants in open dialogue around a topic of choice, okay? So moderators use open-ended questions, that's myself and Shantae, and we don't give you answers, but we do lead you to outcomes through intentional dialogue. But we're going to challenge assumptions and we're going to support you. We encourage our guests to engage in meaningful, respectful, intentional conversations. And we understand that every position isn't shared, but on this call, every position is respected, right? So whether you agree with what they're saying or not, we feel the need to show up for each other and by means of respect and just honoring a person's truth, okay? We acknowledge the therapeutic nature of these conversations. However, we discourage substituting your personal sessions with your therapist for these meetings, okay? So these meetings should serve in addition to the personal work you are doing on your own outside of the platform, all right? Now, disclaimer, the intent of this conversation tonight on the burden of proof is to illustrate ways in which systemic racism impacts Black and Brown people in various spaces. So we're going to explore the mental and emotional effects of racism and the burden of proof required to seek indemnification, which I come from the insurance industry. I have a few other fellow insurance people on the call. So we know indemnification is putting you back in your pre-loss condition. And I use that word loosely because we know our pre-loss condition isn't even where we want to be, but it's better than our post-loss condition, right? So we're just trying to educate the masses. Guests will be encouraged to share their authentic experiences as it relates to the topic. And we ask that if any portion of this conversation bothers anyone listening or watching, you challenge the circumstances and not the person, right? Because you have people who are going to be telling their truth. So in their truth, it might be offensive. And if it bothers you that much, why is this person having to deal with this? Pause there. We will provide tactical strategies and ways to protect yourself, right? Because, I mean, you know, these are tools, not always guaranteed to work, but things you can consider when you find yourself in these different situations. And we challenge you to take this information, utilize it to make a difference for yourself and for others. Because the point of us doing this is to leave you as happy, whole, healthy people. And then you can go out and go forth and prosper and give that to everyone else, okay? So that is the goal every time we connect, right? So now giveaway, we had a giveaway. Last week, we were talking about the Secure the Seat podcast, Mend the Hearts episode, Be Kind to Yourself. And through the course of the conversation, Shantae brought up the life hack from Joel Leon, which was to name one of your plants after you. So purchase a plant, name it after you. So when you talk to it, when you feed it, when you love it and water it, give it affirmations, you'll be telling and feeding yourself all the things you need. And so what we did was we had women in the community, invited them to purchase plants, tag us on the post, and we're going to choose a winner. the winner is going to receive an autographed copy of the memo from Minda Hart, a Did You Grow t-shirt from Pods and PR. You'll get a self-love journal from Shantae, some other Pods and PR goodies, and some other goodies from Shantae's store as well. So I have already done the raffle. There are a few folks who tagged us late. I'm sorry, y'all. Maybe I will run another raffle on Instagram tomorrow. And if so, then if I choose another winner, maybe we'll send you some things as well. Not the same box. You don't get the big box, but you might get something from the virtual connection. So let me go ahead and do the wheel so you can see who the winner was. Oh, so she gonna show up and show out. Okay. Hold on 1 second, y'all. We gonna work it out. Let's see. Wheel doesn't want to work. Of course the wheel doesn't want to work. Give me 2 seconds because I have her saved somewhere else, so it's no pressure. Well, you know what? It's on my phone. So what y'all gonna see me do is pull my phone up.
Work it out.
Go to my photos. Okay, y'all ready? I'm about to show you. Okay. This is the wheel.
It's spinning.
It's spinning. And the winner is...
What we got?
Hold on. It's gonna show you.
What that say?
So you can't see the name, but the name says NEK0623. So Neek0623 is going to be the winner of the giveaway. And if she's on, I don't think she's not a member of the call, but she might be watching us live. So if you are watching us, you just won a virtual connection box, and we'll be mailing it to you very, very, very soon. Okay. So I think my other video might give me a hard time because this one just did. And if it did, I'm going to have to stop sharing for a second and upload the video again, which should take a second, and then we'll be able to show it. But so this month is Minority Mental Health Awareness Month. Shantae, do you want to tell the good people about minority mental health?
Yes. So of course, Minority Mental Health Awareness Month is a month to bring awareness to mental health among Brown and Black individuals. It was started by B.B. Moore Campbell. She was an author, a journalist, and a teacher. And what's interesting is her first novel, which was critically acclaimed, was called Your Blues Ain't Like Mine. And it was inspired by the murder of Emmett Till and the LA riots. So that's how she started her writing career. She later goes on to write novels about mental health and mental health awareness. And so what happened was she put together a task force of family, friends, and allies, and they went around the country. They spoke at churches, spoke in the community about mental health and how important it is to advocate for mental health amongst minorities. She later passed from cancer in 2006, but her task force, her community kept it going, and they end up getting this month officially deemed, the whole name is B.B. Moore Campbell National Minority Mental Health Awareness Month. And so I feel like that's super dope that Black Girl Magic happened and she went and advocated for her community. And so the goal is to improve access to mental health treatment and services and to promote public awareness of mental illness among minorities. It looks different for everyone, but when we think about minorities, there are so many things up against us that it affects our mental health. So we're already starting like 10 feet behind, right? 10 steps back. And so we have to be aware of all of the elements that come with minority mental health, not just, being Black in America, but also the socioeconomic impact of that. And so it's a lot of things. And this month and every month needs to highlight mental health awareness because it's super important. And we need y'all healing and whole because we got work to do, right?
We have for real work to do.
We got some for real work to do.
So Shantae, for those who don't know you, tell them who you are. Tell them what you do, sis.
So my name is Shantae Jackson. I am a licensed professional counselor. I go by the homegirl therapist because I wanted to provide a platform where my community can see someone in the therapy world that looks like them, right? I talk like y'all, we have the same experiences. I'm just a homegirl who just so happens to be a therapist, right? And so I try to encourage and inspire my community to go to therapy and get healing so that we can stop these generational curses, so we can stop all of the kind of things that are affecting us on a day-to-day basis and figure out how to manage that so it's not affecting our lives in a way where we're unhappy. So I am the hunger therapist across all platforms, and I love the virtual connection because it allows me to connect to my people and share my knowledge and really help and assist in the healing process. Again, like Tiffany said earlier, this is not a substitute for therapy, your therapy sessions. We still want you to go and get your individual healing, but come here and see how to use what your therapist tells you, information from us, and apply it to your daily life and make it practical. So don't stop going to therapy because y'all start rocking with us, okay?
And I just want to add, I don't know how, God's plan tends to supersede my plans, because I did not plan to become a mental health advocate, but through my Pause and PR events talking about mental health and cardio for your mind, it just became a thing. And as I started noticing people feeling really safe and just unloading on me, and I was like, this is above me now. What do I do? So I for real had to call in reinforcements. And so I started looking out at first. Initially, I was looking out for Black and brown therapists in other cities I was traveling to and asking them to come to the events, because I'm like, this gets heavy and I'm not equipped to handle all of that part, and I need your assistance. And then it just made sense. Shantae and I formed this partnership, and it's just been, it's Tiff and Tay. It's been like, M&Ms ever since. So So that's why we always push mental health awareness, and we want to encourage you to see your therapist, okay? So we are meaningful. I have Krista and Crystal on the phone. And so this is a little bit of information about their platform, but this is what you find online. I would do the ladies no justice talking about who they are and what they do. So can I please ask you two to introduce yourselves and just talk about the amazing work you've been doing thus far?
Sure. I guess I can go first. Hi, everyone. My name is Crystal Johnson. I am the founder and CEO of Meaningful and one of the co-hosts of the We Are Meaningful podcast. I actually founded Meaningful because I am a first-generation student, first-generation college graduate, professional, and much of my career I've spent trying to figure out how to get from point A to point B to point C, and just really doing some trial and error. So I created Meaningful to be a resource to other Black and brown women who may be in similar situations, to give them the tools and resources they need to navigate, grow, and thrive in corporate spaces. I'll pass it over to Krista, and she'll tell you a bit more about the podcast.
Hi everyone, I'm Krista Galliano, and I'm the other co-host on the We Are Meaningful podcast, and I'm also the head of storytelling for the Meaningful org. Just talking a little bit more about the podcast, right? Crystal mentioned we created this platform to kind of give us the opportunity to elevate the narratives and the stories that Black and brown women are having, especially around their experiences in corporate America. So the beautiful thing about the podcast is that it also helps us in creating and kind of perpetuating this community, much like what's happening here today on the virtual connection, right? Where we're gonna have these therapeutic and really fulfilling conversations that we probably otherwise wouldn't prioritize. Mm-hmm. So it's really important that we're having it today, and I'm excited to be a part of it.
Awesome. So I just wanna thank you all so much again for the work you're doing. And I will tell you that every single time you post a narrative, Krista, I'm like, I need my wine when I'm done, because it's just the emotional load. It's heavy, right? And so I'm going to have to play the narrative for this week as well, because I believe anyone watching this YouTube video needs to hear the narrative you all put out, and it's what we're going to structure our conversation around. So I want to preface the video or the recording with the fact that it could be emotionally jarring and uncomfortable, but again, this is our reality, right? So there's no way around it. We can't really navigate it. Before I do that though, I want to talk a little bit about, oh no, it's actually next. Okay, so it will play. I thought it was gonna be after this next slide. So let's see. Let's see if it's gonna play. Come on, give mama some luck. Nope, okay, give me 2 seconds. I'm going to stop the screen share, and I'm going to pull up the narrative again, because we want to make sure this thing works properly. And watch when I take it off, it's gonna start playing in the background, but that's okay. If it starts to play, we'll just let it play and then I'll go back to screen sharing. Videos. Okay, so I have it on here. Present. And then we're going to go back to Zoom. We're going to screen share. And we're going to pray that it works this time. Let's see. Whenever we get ready to do really important work, we have technical difficulties. That's the sign we're on the right track. So I don't even sweat it no more. Yep. All right, let's see what we got. What? Oh, so they're really not gonna play. Okay. One more place I can go for it. Pause it. Tell me if you all can, I'm gonna stop sharing for a second. If you can hear it when I play it, I'll play it from there and then we'll go back. Can you hear it?
To whom it may concern, and it should concern us all. This isn't an isolated incident, but you knew that. We are constantly evolving to their expectations, adapting to their changing rules, navigating their unequal systems, and yet it still isn't enough. The burden of proof is always on us, and they get the presumption of innocence. How many stories, emails, recordings, articles, data, reports will it take? When will they have the evidence they need to commit to real change for us? They made the game, so they control the narrative, and therefore the outcome. We're fighting for our rights within a system and space that was built to keep us down. And unfortunately, they also are the only ones with the true power to change it. Please. I'm asking you to be intentional. I'm asking you to be objective and equitable. I'm asking you to check your bias. I'm asking you to stand up and challenge. I'm asking for justice, but I'm also asking for the right to exist in peace. Please. 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 They are everywhere. They are our CEO, our executives, our managers, and our colleagues. They are secretly policing our Black and Brown employees. They're dishing out negative performance reviews because they can. They're scheming to disposition us. They are uncomfortable with the cultural differences. They mean well, though, right? They are being protected and we are being maligned. They are validated every time we're harmed without reparation. They laugh and tell us it was never about race. But they're always the same folk, and so are we. You know who they are. You might even belong to this elusive they. Do better. Sincerely, people of color.
I don't care how many times I hear that narrative. Every single time I hear it, it does something to me. So before I even get into the conversation, I just want to ask everyone on the call if anyone wants to share their thoughts when they first heard the narrative and yeah, just what did you think and feel? Because that's what they did to me, right? So when I talked to them, they're like, listen to this narrative. And I was like, boom, boom. I didn't know it was going to like hit me on both sides. And they're like, now what do you feel? And I said, I don't even know how to process this right now, right? It took me a minute. What were your thoughts initially when you heard the narrative? And I don't want to school teacher anybody, but I will call a name if no one wants to volunteer and answer the question.
I'll go.
Oh, okay, go ahead.
Hey. I struggle through it every time. I did listen to your podcast, all those episodes regarding this topic, and I had to fast forward through it every time because I was one of those people who could not watch the full video of George Floyd. I just could not. But I feel like the narrative is just on point. Like it is so on the nose that it does definitely trigger you emotionally. Like you kind of end up, that do better was like the best 2 words you could have ended it with, because that's all we got. You know, it's like they have the power to change it. And that's the truth. It's really like we can continue to keep, you know, supporting each other, you know, through this thing. But ultimately it's kind of like it's a heart change or something that needs to happen. That's how I feel about it. I feel like it's definitely so yeah, it hurts. I'm glad that we're talking about it because it was something that for years I thought was my personal issue. And so this conversation has definitely brought you know, just us having more talks about this over the last few years, I think has really it's like a catch-22 because you're like, you know, I'm glad we're all talking about it. We can support each other, but at the same time, it's like, dang, like we all really are dealing with this, you know? So yeah, I mean, that's just, it was perfect as far as a way to describe what this is to me.
I agree. Someone else was going to speak. Who was it?
Oh, it was me.
Yes, ma'am.
When hearing that narrative, excuse me, it does make you feel powerless. I will say that was the initial word that popped up in my head when I listened to it, because you are trying to figure out how are we going to overcome this, right? Because it's so deeply rooted, right? Like this ain't no surface level stuff. This stuff runs deep and it looks massive to us. And I think that's where a lot of us are struggling processing this, right? It's like, where do we even start? What do we even do? Like, what do we even say? How do we even make change in our day-to-day lives? And so that narrative really just struck a chord. And I've stopped watching those videos. Like I've stopped deliberately exposing myself to that because it's like, it's every week or it's every other month or it's whatever. And so for me, hearing it and just hearing the words, right? Hearing the audio, it puts it on another level for me. It was real. It was good. It was good to hear. And I'm glad that we are having these conversations and we are acknowledging that there is an issue and that we know we need to unite, right? We know we need to support one another in order to come out on the other side of this. And so I'm glad to see that part of it.
The I Can't Breathe messed me up.
Yeah.
Oh, they had a conference 2 weeks ago, I think it was, I attended. And when you had the last event at the main stage, you played it. And I was one of the folks who saw the picture, but I had never watched the video. So I had never heard his voice and I had never heard him say, I can't breathe. And immediately, as soon as I heard it, I had to stop. Like I had to get up for a second and just walk away and then come back because, yeah, I'm just gonna process that. Tawana, you have your hand up.
Okay. So for me, it was triggering on, I guess, maybe 2 levels. Well, the 2 things that came to mind was in the workplace, how we talked, how the narrative bringing that up in the workplace and how it's not really necessarily our problem to fix because we didn't build it, we didn't create it. It's not something that we didn't have a hand in creating this problem. And the conversation needs to be had with it needs to be much more inclusive with men and women because they need to see how it's affected people who sit next to them in the workplace every day. Just
having to see these things and not understanding the conversations that we have with our children. So how they're supposed to interact with people when they walk out in public. Because I think that they think it's like a surface level hurt. They don't understand that it bothers us on a level that we can't even articulate sometimes. I'm having trouble right now. And the other thing for me was just even noticing disparities in pay at work. As hard as I work and as much as I give to this job, I'm still the least paid in my area of work. I'm also it's actually one other African American lady there, and she is paid at their level because she's been there longer. But there's people that entered this workplace at the same time as me, and the pay disparities, even in that sense, and how I'm giving so much, and it's taking that much more effort for me to even climb the ladder to get to equal, whatever that may be. So it was just triggering on so many levels at home and at work, and how we have to respond with including people that don't look like us, because we are almost essentially the choir, and the conversation needs to be happening with other people.
I agree with that completely. I'm going to take Latia's hand, and then I'm going to move to the next slide. Latia?
I guess after hearing that, it's been a while since I've heard that recording, and I think I forced myself to watch it when I saw it, because before I'm like, okay, like another Black man dies, you know, you look at the article and it just kind of takes my breath away to know that we continue to have to deal with the same issues over and over and over again. And then just like now, like it was saying, they control the narrative. Like right now, I don't know if anyone's been noticing, but Breonna Taylor, she's no longer trending. Like George Floyd is no longer trending. So it's being washed out. Like these situations are washed out. And it's like, okay, so what's the next thing that's going to happen? Because something's going to come up. And are we going to forget about that situation and just begin to go about life as normal? Because it continues, it's a cycle, and it just keeps happening and happening. And unless we all kind of come together and, I guess, assist with the change, or not even that, because sometimes, you know, we don't even know what to do because they control everything. So I think it's a feeling of frustration, and then also just being speechless. I mean, George Floyd said like he can't breathe. Like at times, every time I hear this, or another Black man getting killed, or another Black woman getting killed, it's like, well, dang, like, are they going to take all of our breath away? Mm-hmm. So that's just kind of, it bothers my spirit to have to continue to go over this all the time, over and over again.
Yeah, there's definitely a spiritual effect. It's not even about just like your human existence. It's a spiritual thing at this point, because it's like, it's an attack on the soul almost, right? And I don't have the words to articulate how I feel. I'm sick of it. I'm sick of it. So I thought it would be good for me to just explain, before we get into the questions, structural racism. And I'm doing this one because we have people on the call who may not be familiar with racism. If somebody happens to stumble across the video who, you know, doesn't know much about racism, I will tell you, and I think I've mentioned this on a couple of our calls in the past, being from Miami and growing up with people who are from all different places, it was the norm to be around minorities, right, and diverse people. And so I read about racism in books, but I can't recall like ever really experiencing racism as a kid. It was when I became, you know, an adult, and I started to move away from home into other places where it was not as diverse. That's when I started to realize, like, oh wait, this is racism. Like, this is what I read about. This is what it is. And so I wanted to highlight structural racism and then explain why that is important for this conversation. So you can see it on the screen, but basically in the US, it is the normalization and legitimization of an array of dynamics, historical, cultural, institutional, and interpersonal, that routinely advantage whites while producing cumulative and chronic adverse outcomes for people of color. It is a system of hierarchy and inequity, primarily characterized by white supremacy. And so a lot of times when white people hear about racism, I've heard people say, well, I'm not a white supremacist, so I'm not racist. It's deeper, keep reading. So the preferential treatment, privilege, and power for white people at the expense of Black, Latino, Asian, Pacific Islander, Native American, Arab, and other racially oppressed people, right? So I'm gonna skip some of it and go down to indicators or manifestations, because we heard the definition, but when you want to know what does it look like day to day, what is the practical like appearance of racism, structural racism, the key indicators of structural racism are inequalities in power, right? Access or lack of access, opportunities, treatment, and policy impacts and outcomes, whether they are intentional or not. And so I'm highlighting structural racism because it is the most profound and pervasive form of racism. And all other forms of racism stem from structural. So the institutional, interpersonal, internalized, all of that comes from structural racism. And you know, there was a point, and I was having a conversation with someone once when they're like, well, everybody and everything isn't racist. Well, no, let's break this down, because racism has made its way into all areas and aspects of life, right? So we have racism in healthcare, education, employment, we have it in housing, discrimination. It's everywhere at this point. So when Shantae said, burn the whole thing down and start over again, I immediately thought about little fires everywhere, right? Because it feels like we just got to burn the whole thing down. And I mean, I'm not telling anybody, pause, hold on, listen, I'm not inciting violence, okay? Don't go burn everything down. But I'm just saying, like, figuratively speaking, it just feels like it's so everywhere at this point that it's difficult to know even where to start. It's almost like when you have to clean your house up and everything's a mess and you're like, I don't even know where to start. So you go in the kitchen and move one thing, and then you go in the bedroom and move another thing, and you really don't get anything done, but you're trying. That's how it feels. That's exactly how it feels, right?
And then you're tired, and then you're
tired.
Yes.
And then you give up. And that's what it feels like when you're dealing with racism on a day-to-day basis, okay? So tonight's conversation, we're gonna talk about inequity in education, healthcare, employment, and then how this impacts our mental health, what role therapy plays in the whole equation, and just racism in general, okay? So I'm gonna open the conversation up to the floor at this point, and anyone can answer. I'd love to know when you started to recognize racism and how did you recognize it? And I'm looking for the hands over to my left. Okay, I see a hand. Akeisha?
Yes, I started when I was about 5 years old. And I didn't understand it then because I was 5, but I remember going outside. I don't have any siblings. And it was just me and my mom, single mom. My aunt was keeping me for the day. And I went outside to play. 2 little white girls told me I can't play with you because my mom said I can't play with Black kids.
Wow.
I went back in the house and I told my aunt what had happened. And that's when she had to sit down with me at the age of 5 and tell me what racism is. And she broke it down in a way, I actually kind of sort of remember some of her words, but she broke it down to where I could understand it. But I just remember feeling different. Like, what's wrong with me? Why can't you play with me? Why would your mom say something like that? So it started with me at a very young age.
Where did you grow up, if you don't mind?
I was in Florida. I was in Melbourne, Florida.
Melbourne. Okay.
I was we lived in an apartment complex that was, it was predominantly white. And as I said, I didn't have any cousins, any siblings. My aunt was watching me for the day because my mom was at work. So, you know, she wasn't too far away. She was right there on the patio, and I was at the little park in the community, and it happened then, and it stuck with me. I know we're going to talk about mental health and what these type of experiences do to your mind, but it stuck with me for a very long time.
Yeah, we're definitely going to talk about that, because that I could see that having a long lasting effect on a person, right? After you experience that. So I'm definitely sorry that's something you had to go through. Kim, your hand is up.
Yes, so my experience is a little bit unique. I'm from Chicago, one of the most segregated cities probably in the United States. So my racism didn't come until I became an adult and I started working in the workforce. And at the time, I was in a department where we would host different events for our clients. And so this particular time we hosted at the country club, and I was helping. And so before we kind of got everyone ready, they were like, get something to eat. And so I get in line to get something to eat, and the lady walks up to me and she says, the help doesn't eat until after everyone else has eaten. And I said, the help? So I don't even know if the movie was out at the time or if it had come out. And so I'm like, help? What is she talking about? Yeah. And I really didn't know how to respond because I'd never experienced it, because all my life I went to school with Black kids. My school was 99.9% Black. Rarely had a white teacher. If I did, it might have been 10%. So I wasn't trained or prepared to respond to that. So I had to lean on one of my other colleagues who was Black to help. I'm like, girl, she told me I couldn't eat because I was the help. And so she went over there, and I just had to watch her handle that. And from that point on, I think that's where my eloquent rage came into place. Racism.
I love the way you phrase that. You know, it's so funny because people who grow up racist assume that you're familiar with dealing with that, right? So they know what to say, and they expect that you know how to navigate those conversations. And I too was taken aback when I was met with racism. In fact, I didn't even recognize it as racism. As I started learning and educating myself more, I'm able to think back on encounters and experiences from 10 years ago. And I'm like, oh, dang, they were being racist. And the whole time I just thought they were bad people, because to me, it was like good people, bad people, right? And it wasn't really about like, oh, this mean white person. But then after I learned, oh, that was an intentional dig at me because of who I am and what I am. And I just didn't recognize it. So I guess that whole phrase, ignorance is bliss, is true. Because I was only mad at the person, and I wasn't focusing on the fact that they were treating me in a way that was not equitable. Yeah. Crystal, your hand is up.
Yes. So I love that you called that out, Tiffany, when you said good and bad, because I think that what we have continued to learn over time is that racism is on a spectrum, that it's not just binary. And for me, I will say that before I recognized racism, I was thinking about it in that way as well. And as I reflect, it was actually when I was studying abroad in South Africa that I really felt that I was experiencing racism for the first time, because South Africa was under apartheid for a very long time, where people were separated based on skin color. And although I was there in 2008, there were still some remnants of that based on how I walked through the world in South Africa. So on my service learning trip, I was actually with mostly white women. I think there were probably 3 of us who identified as Black, but there were plenty of times where I would be standing in line with the white women who were also with us, and I would just be ignored, like I wasn't with them. Times where I went out with them at night, and in South Africa, there are actually street children who walk around with no shoes on and they beg for money. And we were at this Irish pub, and this Black street child walked up and he was asking for money. And this white South African man was like, go ask her, she's your people, go ask her. And then all the white women that were with me kind of like jumped on him to protect me. But it was just so, I don't know, like it was traumatic is the only way that I can describe it. And I'll say that from that point, I was able to see what those disparities were in my own country after recognizing and experiencing what happened to me in South Africa.
Yeah, that's the part where it starts to hurt, because it's like once your eyes are opened, you can't close them. It's like you can't unsee it. Now you see it all the time, and even when people are not being vocal about it, you recognize it, and it just changes the way you experience things, all kinds of things. I'm so I don't even want to keep saying I'm so sorry, but I really I hate to hear that we've all kind of had these terrible encounters with racism. Aries, your hand is up.
Yeah, I'm similar. It's kind of a mix between what you said and what Crystal said. Like I grew up in the Bay Area. I'm from the Bay Area. I moved to Texas when I was 27. I didn't realize some of the things that I was experiencing was racism until after. And my first actual blatant in my face racist moment was in the Czech Republic. It was out of the country. I was in grad school with my classmates, which we only had about 3 Black people in the class, and an Indian couple were the only people of color in the program. Um, and they, even within my program, so like when I was in the class, we would get 3 of us, the 3 Black ladies who were in the program, they would mix our names up all the time. Like they would always say, call me somebody else. They would just call our names different. All the people, like, except for my classmates, like the teachers, the people that were instructors and things like that, would always mix our names up to the point where even my classmates, we have made up a name. All our names put together was our name. Like we were like, we just gonna be Arizika Parker now. Like since can't get our name right, right? So we made a joke of it, but that was kind of the thing. That happened to me at jobs and stuff before as well. But when we went out of the country, me and the one other Black lady and the Indian couple decided we were going to go off the beaten path and go to a different restaurant. That's what the tour guide said. Like, you won't get, got for, as a tourist, financially or whatever, go somewhere over here. So we do that. And the first place we tried to go to, the man literally was standing in front of the door, like, we don't have no more seats. No more seats. You can't eat here. And I was like, it took me a minute to really, I'm like, I'm looking at seats. Like no restaurant just says we don't have seats. They'll be like, it's a wait, or something like that. And literally he was like, no, like he had a bad, he had a bad attitude too. And I was like, is this a racial moment? Like, I've never experienced like a straight up in your face, you can't come up in here. And it's clear it's only brown people here. Like, and there's other people over here walking in that are not. So I was like, oh my God, that messed me up for the rest of the trip. Like we were there for 10 days. We were in Prague for 5 days. And then we went to Paris. When I got to Paris, it was better because it's more diverse, and it wasn't that. But when we were there, I literally was in my hotel every day. I'm like, I can't imagine being my ancestors, like they dealt with this on a reg. And I had one moment and I'm like, about to have a breakdown about it, or whatever. And so, similar to what you said, Tiffany, is like when you grow up kind of in a diverse area, you don't really recognize things as racism when they are, especially the systemic things within the workplace, things that were happening where I'm just being this go-getter. I'm like, I'm smart. I'll have all this confidence and people tearing me down, but I was thinking it was me. I didn't think that it was a systemic thing. I really was thinking like, what am I doing wrong? Like it started giving me imposter syndrome after a while. But then I started educating myself and learning more that it's not you. It's happening to a lot of other people as well. So
we're going to table that strategy because educating ourselves can do so much as it relates to combating some of the effects of racism. It doesn't eradicate it, but it positions us to be able to respond in a way that we might not have before we had the education, right? So I'm going to move to inequity in education. And if anyone on the call has an example where they can help illustrate what that looks like and where you had the burden of proof to prove to someone this was your experience and this is what you were dealing with, I'd love to hear from you. So I'm going to look at the comments over to the left and see whose hand goes up. And don't all go at one time. Crickets, crickets. Cool. So I'll give an example of a time. And I have several examples from Texas when I lived there for that very short period of time. But one of the situations I dealt with, and I kind of touched on it in one of our other conversations, was my son was in a school in Texas. And I recall he was getting a ton of referrals. He was getting indoor suspension all the time. And this is a kid who had never been suspended, had made straight A's and B's, never brought home less than a B through school. He was 6th grade going into 7th grade and was making D's and F's. And he was getting everything taken from him. He was on punishment. He could care less. He was not interested in school. At the time, I was traveling a lot with work because I had a national role. And so I wasn't available all the time. And my husband and I, parents who are busy were like, you need to go to school, you need to do your work, listen to the teacher, follow directions. And we didn't take the time to do a deep dive and really understand like what is happening right now, right? So fast forward, I stopped working and I started going to the school every Tuesday to have lunch with my son. And it was the most eye-opening experience I ever had. Because once I started going to the school with my son, I started to see how the Black kids sat at one table in the cafeteria and all the other kids sat together. And I realized that there were no Black administrators at his school, that most of his teachers were white women. There was, when I asked the school to show me like a breakdown demographic wise, very small population of Black people in the school system, okay? Where this came into play was, and this is just one specific incident, where my son got indoor suspension for 2 days and I didn't know about it until he had been in indoor suspension for 2 days. They didn't tell me before they did it. So when I found out about it, I was very upset. And I asked him what happened. And he told me, you know, he was in PE. There was this bigger white kid who was coming at his friend. It was an Indian kid coming at him. And he jumped in the middle to break up the fight. And he said they put him in indoor suspension for putting his hands on the boy, right? So I'm like, that doesn't make sense. So of course I request a conference, I go to the school. My son is savvy enough and says, Mom, they have cameras in the gym, ask them to play the tape. So I got the referral and the referral said, you know, he put his hands on somebody he wasn't supposed to. That's a violation of their code of conduct, blah, blah, blah. That's why he had 2 days. When I saw the video, I went from here to here. First of all, my son had never had a fight a day in his life. Like, he's not a fighting kid. He doesn't fight. So I watched the video and literally you see this kid, this one kid, twice the size of my son, coming at my son. Like, he's coming at the other kid, but my son is like in the middle like this. And you see this kid pushing my son, kicking my son, like almost manhandling him to get him out of the way to get to the other kid. Meanwhile, teachers are in this gym. No one does anything. The kids end up breaking it up, okay? So when I see this, I am furious. And I said, not only should he not have been suspended and missed 2 days of schoolwork or classwork, but he shouldn't even had a referral because he was breaking up a fight. And so, you know, I had to go through this big old thing with the school because they were telling me my son was wrong for putting his hands on his kid. And I said, did you watch the same video I watched? I had to go back and forth with the assistant principal, with the PE teachers, because the other question is, why weren't any of the teachers paying attention to the kids, okay? Had to go back and forth with the principal. They still wouldn't overturn it. Had to go to the school district. They still wouldn't overturn it. Finally, I said, if you all don't overturn this, I'm gonna call the news and I sent an email, you're gonna hold on to this tape. And I'm gonna call the news and I'm gonna let them look at it and they can tell us how this should have been handled. It goes away, okay? From that moment on, my foot went on their neck. Because I said, there's not going to be a situation where my son is going to have to deal with this by himself because he shouldn't have had to go through that. And what was so bad about it was when the school board called me back and said they were going to remove it, do you know they called me and said that this kid had been bullied at school and he's dealing with depression and, you know, that is why he did. And I said, look, was my son the kid who was bullying him? No? Okay, so then whatever he is dealing with is separate from my son. You will not make this kid the victim and then have my son here dealing with whatever he has going on. I said, because if he comes in here and kills everybody in the school, I mean, honestly speaking, or shooting up the school, is it gonna be excused then? You get what I'm saying? And so it was eye-opening for me because then I started noticing how they heighten situations, small incidents, referrals, indoor suspension, and they were creating this narrative of a kid who was violent, because he never had a fight, who was uncontrollable. And what that does, now you look down the line when you've had 10 incidences that are all documented, now you can justify a case of putting this kid out of the school. And at that point, the school to prison pipeline made perfect sense to me. Mm-hmm. So I'll save what I did to fix it for later, but I just want you to think about that because sometimes in schools, and I have a few educators who come to our calls regularly, they will tell you that some teachers teach because they want to get, not all, I love teachers, I love educators, I have them in my family, but that didn't sound right. That sounds like I have Black friends. I'm sorry, y'all, I'm sorry. But I do. So I'm sensitive to educators, but I love educators, but we know that some educators take positions in urban schools because they get tuition reimbursement and things like that. and they get more money. And it's not because they have an affinity for Black and brown children, but it's because it helps their financial disposition. And so you have kids going to schools and they're not receiving equitable treatment. And psychologically, that does something to the kids long term, because my son came home and broke down. He was boohoo crying and he said, I feel like I can't do anything without walking on eggshells. And to see a kid in 7th grade have that kind of breakdown, I told my husband, Texas is not going to work for us. And that is how we're here in Florida now, because it wasn't working.
And the thing is too, with that though, they bet on that. They bet on parents, not our Black and brown parents, not coming to the schools to investigate, right? To educate themselves, to ask the necessary questions. And they bet on that. They know not everyone is going to do that. So when they have a parent who does, it's like, okay, anything you want, just so you can be quiet. Let's just do this and move forward, right? And so it's like, that's what you said earlier. It's important that we educate ourselves on these narratives and educate ourselves on what's actually going on behind the scenes. So, yeah.
Yeah, because I also add, they hadn't written the other kid up and he didn't have suspension. So when I found that out, because at first they didn't want to tell me, and I said, oh, you better give him suspension too. And I'm sure his parents were pissed and I could care less because it wasn't okay. Mm-hmm. And my kid, they're like, he should have known better because he shouldn't put his hands. My kid's never been in a fight. He doesn't know what to do at this moment. He's just trying to break down the situation. That's it. Kim, your hand is up.
Yes, so I felt all of that. My mother is an educator. Again, just want to reiterate, I came from a background of going to school with all Blacks. So when I moved to Texas and my daughter went to public school, she went to school that first year and it was different for both of us because I think she was 2nd grade. So she had experienced going to school with all Blacks. So now we pivot. We're in a school where she is the minority. It's only maybe 3 or 4 of them. It's culturally a shock to her as well as myself, but I'm like, hey, you know what? They say it's a good school district. So school is going throughout the year. She comes home one day. She says, I was playing on the playground during recess and a little girl told me I couldn't play with her. I said, well, why? She said, she told me she was allergic to Black people. So then at that point, I had to go put on my all Black. And the next day, I called up to the school. I think I left a voicemail that day. It might have been at 6 p.m. She didn't call me back. I think I told my boss, I was like, I can't even mentally be at work knowing that my daughter feels that way, that her classmates, they don't care for her. And I said, well, did you tell someone? She was like, yeah, they didn't do anything. So I think I took off that next day. And they said, well, you need an appointment to come up here. And I said, okay, well, I'll make an appointment. So they just kept avoiding me. And so then I want to say the next day she came in and there was open house. And so I popped up on the principal at the open house and I walked up on her and I said, hello, how are you? She's like, hi. I said, I'm Kiara's mom. And I startled her. I said, I've been trying to reach you so that we could talk about this. And so the next day they said, okay, we'll talk about it. We'll make an appointment next week. So they pulled Kiara into the office the next day to say, without my permission or without me knowing, are you sure that's what you heard? And so she came home and told me that. And she's like, well, I don't know if that's what I truly heard. I said, don't you ever let them make you believe that something that you heard, you stand on it. And don't allow them to change your mind. If you know you heard that, stand on it. And so at that point, I actually ended up taking her out of school and putting her in a private school an hour away in a predominantly Black neighborhood, because I could not let my daughter go to school and she did not feel loved, nurtured, and that they had their best intent for her. So unfortunately, it didn't work out. We ended up coming back to the school district, but I know exactly what you're talking about. They can't flourish and learn if they know that they aren't liked.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, good is relative. And so it's funny because when we moved to Texas, we lived in this very nice house in the suburbs. We had the school right down the street and everything is around us. And the school gave laptops and they had all the things. And I was like, oh, this is a beautiful school. It's a great school. Yep. What Texas taught me is good is relative, right? Because it's up to what you need, what your kid needs. And I struggled because I'm not a quitter and I'm a fighter, right? And I told myself, like, if I pull my kid, Am I teaching him to run from these situations? Am I teaching him that he can't handle it? But it got to a point where have you ever watched a fight and you saw someone being beaten up so bad and you're like tap out, like enough is enough. I saw what it was doing to him, to his person. And I just said, it wasn't worth the fight for me anymore at that point, if it makes sense.
Yeah.
Maureen, your hand is up, and then we're going to go to inequity in healthcare. And I just want to add real quick before I go to Maureen. In each of these instances, what you're hearing is our children experience things, and then we have to go above and beyond to validate their experiences and to prove this is actually happening. And so when you hear the words burden of proof, I'm hoping this is giving you context, right? In an educational sense, this is what it looks like when you have a situation and it's not believed. And so you're having to go the distance to prove to someone that this is what you actually experienced, which shouldn't be required. Yes. Maureen, your hand was up.
I too experienced, we just moved from Tampa to to Alabama, I'm sorry. And I have one son who is a little more likable. And then I have another son who is like his mom and very vocal. And so the one son, and a lot of times they consider it bad behavior, or it's in the category of bad behavior. So I go to a conference, first time in the school, I go to the conference to see where, how's it going? Because of course, I'm not in a diverse area in Alabama. It's a little bit more predominantly white. And so the teachers are like, and I was like, look, I'm doing this. I just need to make sure I'm in this with you guys. It's a team effort. I'll do my part at home. You guys do your part, that's it. Well, I don't know where in their mind they felt like I was against my child. But dialogue a couple of months later came, and my son was like, well, this is what happened in class. Like it was a punishment. I didn't know until after he received the punishment. Nobody commented, nobody texted me, nothing. And so I'm like, well, what's going on? And he was like, well, this and this and this and this has happened. So I messaged the teacher and said, well, Groshan told me something about blah, 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 blah. She responds, well, he's making other kids uncomfortable. They are doing all this long story. And I said, well, he also informed me that you made him feel uncomfortable about acknowledging something that a kid and made him embarrassed. What is, that's as much as you may think, I don't know what you thought from the conference, but I'm his mother first. And if you played a part in making him feel uncomfortable, what part of this do you own? When I tell you that COVID saved me from going up to the school, and it just so happened that he is shifting from elementary to middle school. So the dialogue that I wanted to have, God spared it with Corona. And on top of that, what I realized is that it's not all the teachers, because the same thing, the likable son, I had a white teacher who was like, I was like, did Marcus do his homework? And he was like, no. And I'm about to go to the gym and get him. And he went and was like, Marcus, did you do your homework? Let me find your homework. Marcus was like, So he checked him. The greatest thing about this whole thing is that this same teacher is Groshan's football coach. So I've already established a rapport of accountability from the teacher looking out for accountability on holding my sons accountable, as well as I know that he's going to hold his part as being a teacher, understanding it's a team effort. But the fact that he had to go through that made him want to go back to Tampa real quick.
Mm-hmm.
And
yeah, you want to run.
And the sad thing is that this was my child this time. I don't know whose child it will be next time. It's just Corona made it to where we can't have a dialogue. And the teacher never responded on that message, the messaging forum since then. Like I have no messages except the general messages of, okay, guys, it's the end of the year, but nothing, no apology, no nothing.
That's terrible. Akeisha, I forgot your hand was up before Maureen's hand was up.
Yes, no worries. I'll keep it really short. I'm an educator as well. So everything you guys are saying, I have seen it plus more. So I just want to applaud you for being there. And like someone said earlier, they expect us not to. That's what they have in their head. They're not involved and they're not going to come. They expect us not to. That's why they try to put the punishments and put the labels in place that they have. I have had to have so many conversations with other teachers about labels. I stand in the hallway when the kids are transitioning and just hear so many things, and I don't let it fly. And it's in a professional manner, just to let them know you need to think about your thinking, because this label you have placed on this child is not true. So keep it up.
Thank you so much. Yeah. I mean, and like I said, we're going to touch on tactical ways to show up and to help get ahead of these issues. But I will tell you that me not being able to work where I was working and having that time to be present, it worked wonders because it helped me to understand my kid wasn't just acting out, right? Like he wasn't just wanting to fail. There were things going on that he couldn't even articulate because like myself, when I first saw it, he didn't know how to explain that, right? So it was necessary for me to show up in that moment and be present for him. I want to switch to healthcare, right? So let's talk about inequity in healthcare. And if any, I know there were a couple of women who had said they had some experiences as it relates to healthcare. I don't remember who it was exactly though. I think it was Takora, maybe. Let's talk about it, Takora.
Yeah, I did. So, for those that don't know, I have lupus, and lupus is hard to diagnose. And so when I first, well, I had been sick for a while. I was diagnosed three or 4 years ago, and when I first started getting sick, the first time I had blood clots about 3 years prior, and then before that, I was waking up with my lips swelling, like every few days. I would just wake up, I pop a Benadryl, they would go down after a couple of hours, and I would go to work. And then when it would just get so bad, I went to see the doctor that was at my job back when I had a corporate job. I worked in healthcare, so we had a doctor on the first floor. Went and saw her, and like she just would not listen to me. And that was when I kind of figured out that if I looked different, it would have went a different way. Cause she was telling me I was having like hand, foot, and mouth disease. She was telling me that it was allergies. Yeah. And so I was like, okay, I'm like you, Tiffany. I just try to see the good in the bad. Mm-hmm. So I'm threatening my sister like your baby done got me sick. Because I was like, okay, well, maybe that is it. Because I didn't think that, at the time that I had lupus, and I went and I saw my primary care doctor, and I'm trying to ask her, what's wrong with me, because it is so hard to diagnose. And I'm one of those people, people can feel how they want to feel, but I have requirements for the doctors that I see, and they have to be Black, female, and Christian. And that's just how I feel about the doctors that I see. So she sent me to a dermatologist. And when she walked in, she looked right at me. And in 2 minutes, she said, "You have lupus." Wow. And she said, "We'll test it, but I know you have lupus just by looking at me." After this white lady argued me down, I was just like trying to tell this lady everything that was wrong with me. And she completely ignored everything that I said for like 3 weeks of going back and forth with her. But someone who looked like me listened to me. And the same thing happens at the emergency room when I go there and I try to explain to them, okay, look, this is what's wrong with me. Lupus is different for everybody. And what happens with me is the muscles of my chest wall, they get inflamed. So it's hard for me to breathe sometimes. But I know what it's like when I go to the emergency room. They're not going to listen to me. They're just going to say it's a lupus flare, or because I've had blood clots, they're going to test me for blood clots, and then they're going to send me home. They don't care if I feel like I'm about to die, if I feel like I'm going to have a heart attack. They're not trying to listen to me. But if I was Sarah or Susan, I feel like it would go a completely different way. And I know it would, because that's the way it is for so many other women who look like us. And it's so frustrating. So that's why, I know it's frustrating for like my friends and my family, but I will sit here until Shantae knows, I will sit here until I feel like I am on this floor bawling and crying before I will go to that emergency room, because it's so frustrating for somebody who's sick to have to sit there and tell the doctor, this is what's wrong with me, that's what's wrong with me. But okay, well, we're just gonna do a CAT scan. I know what's wrong with me. Why can't you just listen to me?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's terrible. And I hate that you've had to experience that, because I don't know what that feels like, but I keep hearing stories. One of my friends, Arlesia, is on the call. She's a nurse, and she's been a nurse for many years. And she talks about the inequity in healthcare and how they're taught in school that is just different for women of color. But she never questioned why until she started working in the field and she started to see different things. And it just blew her mind to see the disparity in healthcare as it relates to African-American women. I want to switch to Felicia for a second, and then I'll hop over to Kim because Felicia's hand is up.
I just wanted to say that I kind of have the same experience with Takara. I am the same exact way. You must be a Christian and you must be Black, whether you're a male or a female, in order to treat me in any capacity. Because I also have a condition, which is PCOS, and I'm in pain every day. And for those who don't know what it is, it's polycystic ovarian syndrome. And I have pain every day. And when I was younger, I was diagnosed with it when I was 17. I actually started showing symptoms at 15. And I went to several white doctors. All of them kept sending me to different places, not really trying to help me. And finally, somebody overheard in the office and say, hey, you might want to go see an endocrinologist. And she gave me a referral to a Black endocrinologist. As soon as I walked in, she started noticing different things about my skin, the rashes, all kind of things that I was showing. And it kind of the same thing with you with your lupus. Like she said, I think you got PCOS, but I'm gonna do some blood work. And finally, she sat down, listened, did the blood work, did everything that she needed to do. And I was able to get a diagnosis. And after 2 years of being in constant pain and having a lot of things going on, you know, it really felt good for somebody to be able to listen and actually explain. And I remember at 17, she told me, she said, whenever you go to a doctor, have them document every single thing that they tell you. So if you ask for a certain medication and they tell you no, it must be on file. So that way, if something happens, you have some type of paper trail. And so I make sure now, whenever I leave a doctor's office, regardless if it's just for a routine physical, you're going to give me a printout, some notes or something, telling me what you did, the medications you prescribed, why you prescribed them, and why I'm no longer taking medication. Because at the end of the day, that's the only way I can protect myself. Because they're not going to care. And you really can't sue for malpractice because that stuff is so expensive that, you know, the attorneys really aren't going to take it unless you did. So it's like you really have to find a way as a Black woman or as a Black person in general to protect yourself, because they're only going to do what, you know, they think is best or whatever. But, you know, I just always been an advocate of making sure, you know, research something so that way when you go in there, you are armed. I'm not saying, you know, we're doctors or anything like that or have medical degrees, but at least know yourself. So that way they can't tell you about yourself and what you're actually experiencing. They have to actually listen to you. So,
you know, the part I hate about this, the part I hate is that it puts us in a position where we have to be like assertive in situations where we should just be able to say, hey, this is what I'm feeling, and have a collaborative conversation. And then the moment we have to assert our position, now we're aggressive, right? And now we're demanding, and now we're overbearing. But it's like, it shouldn't require that I push you to this extent for you to hear what I'm saying and for you to communicate with me in the way that you would communicate with a customer or client or patient who didn't look like me. You know, Shantae, it looks like you're about to say something. Go ahead.
Because it all goes back to the topic at hand. We have to prove that these things are wrong with us. We have to prove that what I'm saying is true, and I'm telling you about me. And me telling you about me still isn't enough. And so that is so frustrating. And it's one of those things where it's just like, I just want to go to the doctor and get help, period. Right? Like, I shouldn't have to ask for a printout. I shouldn't have to say, okay, well, you're saying no to this. I need you to have that in writing. Like, what are we doing here? Right. You know, and so it can be extremely frustrating to have to deal with that. And it shouldn't be that difficult.
No, it shouldn't. But it puts us on the defense, right? Because you have to protect yourself. And it's an unfortunate position to be in. Kim, your hand was up, and then I saw Crystal's hand go up.
Yes. So similar to Takara and Felicia, I had the same issue. So as a child, I had very bad cramps. And my mother always had me with a white doctor, and I was always uncomfortable with these doctors, especially with the male gynecologist. And so they would just prescribe, hey, take some ibuprofen, take some over-the-counter medicine. So for many years, I would experience this pain, like to the fact that my parents would have to come pick me up once a month from school because it was so excruciating. And I would continue to go to the doctor, but for many years, it went ignored. I've gone to the ER for it. And so it just got to a point where I could barely even physically go to work, and I didn't know what was going on. And so I decided to switch gynecologists. I decided to go to a Black gynecologist. They never had one. And she just ran all of the tests. She went through every test possible. I had to do a biopsy, and come to find out I had endometriosis. So for years, I had something that I wasn't even aware of because no one took the time to really listen and understand or run those tests. And so before the age of 40, I had already had hysterectomy, because at that point, that was the only other option. And I'm too, like you all, I only go to Black female doctors as well. So I just don't feel like, and I come from an insurance background, and so we've already done the studies of the disparities of people of color, and just even with the opioids, and we have the strong Black women syndrome, so they feel like our pain isn't as, that we can endure that pain. Mm-hmm. And so they won't prescribe us the medicine that we need sometimes because they feel like, oh, they're just exaggerating. So just like you all, I mean, I'm an advocate in the healthcare industry as well, as it relates to making sure they hear my voice. But it is sad that we have to be assertive. And I was going through so much pain at that time that I shouldn't have to exert that energy for someone to just hear and understand what my pain is.
I agree completely. Crystal, your hand was up.
Yeah, so the only thing that I wanted to say was that I hear this underlying theme. So when we think about corporate spaces in general, and we think about Black talent versus white talent, for example, and we think about the fact that we have to work twice as hard. Like, we have to be magic, we got to be unicorns, we have to be a purple squirrel. It sounds like it's the same sort of theme in these situations as well, because the Black doctors are going above and beyond. Like, they're doing all these things to get it right. And the white doctors are like, no, you're fine, and nothing happens. Like, there's no accountability. But I guarantee that if a Black doctor made a mistake, like some of these white doctors have, we would be held accountable the next day.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I agree. I have a picture I'm going to post, I think, one day when I had my thyroid removed. It was my first surgery. And I remember I'm a hard stick for whatever reason, even if I drink a ton of water. And so when they were going to run the IV, before we, like, as we were having my pre-surgery consultation, I told them, when you go to give my IV, please make sure you give me the stuff that numbs my hand, because they have to stick me multiple times. And it hurts me very bad to have the IV ran continually. Doctor assured me it would happen. When I got into the, you go check in 6 a.m, they prep you for surgery. And I had this male nurse, and he was a white guy. And I was telling him, hey, they were supposed to have the spray. He was like, well, I'm not using that because it causes the veins to collapse and it's gonna be too hard. And I was like, well, you're not gonna be able to get it. And I'm not gonna go through the pain of you having to do it. So I need somebody to get it because I'm paying for the surgery. And so, he kind of went back and forth with me a little bit. And I was like, well, look, we need to reschedule so that you guys can get it. Because he was like, oh, we don't have it on this end. That's a kid's medication. I'm like, well, somebody can go to the kid's side and get it because I'm spending thousands of dollars for the surgery. I'm gonna need that stuff, you know what I'm saying? So I had to go back and forth. My husband had to speak up. They ended up giving me the stuff, and they ended up sticking me 5 times. The one man who finally got it had to bring the ultrasound machine and put it on my arm to find my vein. And then somebody had to hold it while he ran the IV. And so my whole arm was blue and purple because they had stuck me so many times trying to run the IV. And I think to myself, what if I hadn't been willing to speak up? I would have been sitting there getting stuck all those times. And I can't take the pain personally, but it's that kind of stuff where it's like, but now I got to be made to be a difficult person, or I have to be described as somebody who's confrontational, because I just want you to honor my feelings. I know my body. You practice medicine, but I live in this body. So I know my experiences, Yeah. It's terrible. Tawana, your hand is up, and then we'll go to Cora, and then I want to hop over to employment.
I'm sorry, I'm visiting my mom, so I'm walking around. So my conversation for this is regarding the doctors themselves. I'm an NPR junkie, and I listen to them daily, and they just recently had this segment talking about Black doctors and their experience. They make up only 5% of the medical field, and how even from medical school that they are just treated at such a different level. And I think, well, the lady that was they were interviewing, the doctor that they were interviewing, she was talking about that's where her passion comes from and why she is so adamant about it, because they see it even in med school, how it's almost a culture for them to treat us the way that they do when it comes to our healthcare. But you guys should check it out. I'm gonna find the link and then I'll kind of put it in the
Yeah,
comments
DM
for
it
you
to me
guys.
and I'll be happy to post it on the page as
Sure.
well. Thank you so much. Takora, your hand is up.
So another thing that I also learned like late last year was that I can't be too nice to these foundations that they have for these different diseases, because I give a lot of time and money to a couple of the lupus foundations here, and they had us out to like a night of beauty last year at an event, and I have a support group here that's for like young Black Lupies, and we went. It was a few of us that went, and because I'm so nice, all this stuff had always went over my head, even though I've raised thousands of dollars for them, and I will be making videos and stuff, and I will go on their website and all that. And they talked about how they had helped out other patients and helped them with grants and money and helped them get disability, but it's me and my other friends, and we're like, y'all have never helped us with any of that. So we had questions for them, like, okay, we see that they had all the answers, but y'all have never offered us anything. And when we've tried to hit y'all up and email y'all with questions, nobody's helped us out. So from now on, I haven't donated a penny to them. I don't make any more videos, no more posts, because I was like, okay, well, I see how y'all want to play. Y'all want to put us on your Instagram because it looks good. But when we need your help, you're nowhere to be found. So, yeah, I played that little game.
That's terrible. It's so terrible. It really is. And we keep hearing the same thing. It's just, it's over and over and over and over and over again. People don't believe our pain. So we're going to switch gears and head over to inequity in employment. And I believe every woman on this call, because I know there are some women who have experienced some things and who have climbed some ranks and worked some different places. And I know those struggles. Oh, it's funny because immediately, as soon as I said employment, I have comments straight down the line. So we're going to start with, I'm going to go to Krista because I haven't heard her a lot. Krista, and then we'll go to, I'll work my way up. So Krista, Felicia, Maureen, and Aries. Krista, you go ahead.
Yeah, sorry, I love hearing everybody's perspectives and I love hearing your stories. So I hope you see me in the chat. But I think the biggest experience for me was my first job in corporate America ever, right? Where I was actually the only person of color at this consulting firm of like 30 people. And it was so interesting because they actually specialized in culture change management, but they didn't know anything about diversity, equity, and inclusion. And they really, really leveraged me, not just as a token for like their career sites and their pages and things like that, but they also tried to kind of like leverage my expertise as a woman of color to help inform diversity and inclusion curriculum. Even because obviously, and we can talk about it, right? We tend to be drawn to that work because it's us.
Mm-hmm.
It affects us directly. Mm-hmm. It's not that we should be doing the work all the time, but it's that nobody else is stepping up to the plate to do it the way that it needs to be done. Mm-hmm. So they kind of took advantage of it in that way. And then it was really interesting because they actually ended up letting me go, because the conversation was, we don't feel like you're performing well enough at the role that we hired you for, but you're really, really good at this other thing. So good luck. And we hope you do well doing that somewhere else. And it was so interesting because when I reflect on it, and we'll talk about it when we get to mental health, I think one of the reasons the podcast is so important to me is because I thought I was alone. I thought I was alone in my perspective and feeling dismissed. So I never talked about it. This is actually the first time I've ever like probably publicly said that they let me go. I was really ashamed, right? I was like, oh crap, I was really bad at my job. And of course, already being there, I had all these layers of imposter syndrome. Like I got there and I was so bright-eyed and I was like, oh my God, I'm so grateful. So grateful to be here. Like I made it, mom, I did this, I went to school, this is gonna be great. And they didn't give me learning and development. They didn't give me any tools to grow. They didn't give me anything that would help me to succeed. And it was really interesting because it was in DC, right? So it wasn't even in the South or anything like that. It was in a place where I was surrounded by plenty of Karens and Kevins who were like, we're about this. We're about this. Like, that's what we care about. We care about you. And I'm 1/16 Cherokee. And I'm like, huh? Like, what are we talking about? Come on. So it's just interesting. And that's kind of how I wanted to start it, because I think it's going to take a lot of directions of the conversation. But a big piece is the way how there's so much inequity in the growth and the development and the attention that we're given as employees, but even as humans, and our experiences as an identity, as a group of people, not just as women of color, as a person that's Black. These are very different nuances, right? So
I agree. It's funny because as we talk about development, I believe all of us can probably tell or say, I know I didn't get the development I needed. I had to learn through trial and error. And most of the women I meet who have been, become successful, it was a trial and error type of journey for them as well. So I know exactly what you're talking about. Felicia, your hand was up.
I think as far as inequity, I think I've had the most experience in employment because like I've always been one, I have several degrees, I have certifications, designations, I have the whole everything. But when I get into certain positions, they look and like, oh, well, you have this. I was like, why are you so shocked? They was like, oh, well, they can't say anything. And so, I immediately stopped them. And I let them know, I say, I know what you're going to say. I know what you're thinking, but you can't articulate it. So I said, just let it go. But, one experience I had was after being in claims for so many years, I decided to get into underwriting. And I noticed when I got into underwriting, I became an account analyst, which is basically under the underwriters. And for some reason, all of the account analysts were Black or people of color, and the underwriters are all white. And I know me, I like to work my way up. I like to advance, develop myself so I can eventually get into a position of underwriter or whatever and make more money. And I would notice that they would never, ever, ever, ever hire an account analyst because we were Black. They never transitioned us into underwriters, but yet they would go hire people who just graduated from college who are 10, 15 years under me, and they're white, no experience, nothing, never had a job, but they'll put them in an underwriter position and have to get them trained and get them developed. When I'm here with years of experience and the degrees that you want, 3 more degrees than that person has, but you refuse to develop me so I can get that position. And so, I say, you know what, I'm going to take it upon myself to do what I needed to do. So when the VP came down and we had our meetings and it was only supposed to be for underwriters, so they say, I decided to attend the meeting because I say, you know what, you all won't do it for me, so I'm gonna do it for myself, which is unfortunately, it sucks, but I had to make it work for myself. So, I would talk to the VP and I would let her know, hey, I don't think this is fair. And then on top of that, when you do hire kids from college, you only go to certain colleges. Why is that? Why do you feel you can't go to a HBCU? Or why do you feel you can't recruit a Black person, even if it is at a PWI? Why haven't you all brought in somebody that is a person of color to positions, but for some reason you feel that a Caucasian person is all that you seek? And, what I say to them, it caused a big stir up, which I didn't care because it needed to happen. But, that's when they started hiring and bringing in all kinds of people from diversity inclusions in different, facilities, trying to do all these type of things. And I said, please don't do these things for show. Because at the end of the day, you can bring people in to try to discuss diversity and inclusion, but if you're not going to act upon it, it's no point, because you all are wasting a lot of money and a lot of time. Mm-hmm. And then I noticed, I was like, you know what? I'm clearly above this position and I'm not going to get to where I want to be in this position. So I said, you know what? Let me go apply to different positions within the company. And I noticed when I started applying for those positions, I would get a notification or email from LinkedIn saying a recruiter from this company looked at your profile. And it would probably be an hour after they looked at my profile, I get a declined email. And that was because my picture was on my profile. Same type of picture where everybody go to JCPenney and all these places and take professional headshots, suit, hair pulled back in the bun, all those good things. For some reason, every time they saw my picture, I always got a decline. I noticed the moment I took my picture off, I'm getting invited to all kinds of interviews and getting job offers. And so, unfortunately, I just have to look at it and I'm a Black person, and unfortunately that it shouldn't have to happen, but it's things that we have to do, unfortunately, to kind of tailor to them so that we can get these positions that we want, unfortunately.
Yeah, so it's funny because I came from the insurance industry as well. So, I know your story because we worked in some of the same places or the same. And, as I started building Pause and PR, especially when I talked about topics that were related to race, I had to make a conscious decision like, okay, so if I post this on LinkedIn, it's there. That means that if I ever decide to re-enter corporate, it's a chance that companies are going to see the work I'm doing for DEI and not be about that life and not want to bring me on board, right? And I had to fully commit to my mission. But I had to tell myself also, like, if you're a company that sees what I'm doing and you're not comfortable with it, then I'm not going to be comfortable working with you. So I have to be okay with that opportunity being missed, because you don't ever miss things that were for you, right? And I've had to tell myself, like, you don't ever miss an opportunity that's meant for you. So I'm going to post about my conversations about the memo. I'm going to talk about inequity in the workplace, and I'm going to have my picture on my profile, and either you want me there or you don't. That's kind of the position I've taken. But I understand completely where you are, because it's a very difficult place to be in when you have to provide for your family and you're really wanting to grow your career, and these are the only options that are made available to you. I get it. Takora, your hand was up, and then we'll go to Maureen and then Aries.
So when I worked in healthcare, when I originally graduated from grad school, there was a position that I wanted with Baylor, and there was a recruiter in Houston that was helping me get it. And I had a friend who introduced me to this recruiter, and she told me before I went, she was like, you're probably not going to get this position because she is not going to hire you being Black, younger than her, and having more degrees. And I was just like, oh, okay. I went on the interview. Interview went great. I nailed that interview. Like, I was confident and didn't get the position. I wanted that position so bad. Ended up going to another organization, took a position that I know I was overqualified for, worked my way up to the same position at the organization that I was at, making about $40,000 less than what I would have been making at Baylor. Only because it was like, I wanted the position, and it was like, okay, you just take what you can get, even though I hated the organization that I was at. And what's worse is that the woman that I was working under when I did it at the last position that I had when I was at corporate, loved the manager I had there. She got overwhelmed, stepped down, and the same kind of woman that I originally interviewed for ended up taking her place. And I knew me and her weren't gonna make it. She smiled in my face every day, but people around me knew she was uncomfortable with me. They would tell me she was intimidated by me. And I lasted about 2 months before I was let go. Never had any issues, but I had never lost a job and was let go. I was working on a project for them and everything. And she was just like, she tried to make me feel like it was right after I was diagnosed with lupus. So she tried to make me feel like it was because I was sick, But I was handling being sick very well because it was right after I was diagnosed.
But even that isn't okay.
Right. That isn't okay. And I was just like, you know what? I don't want to work under somebody like that. But I was like, you don't have to, you didn't have to feel that way. But if that's how you are, you know what? You be like that. You be like that. Another thing that I already didn't like about that was that they made me, this is before I ever straightened my hair, and they made me straighten my hair for that position when I went on that interview. They didn't make me, my mentor did. My mentor, who was Black.
Yeah.
And so that position already bothered me from the time that I got it. But yes, I was just like, I mean, that has bothered me. I've been gone now for 3 years, and that has just bothered me so much. I'm like, why does a Black girl with degrees irk them so much? Like, why do we have to work so hard? Like, if you have your position and we find at our desk, like, why does that upset you? I'm over here just doing my job. I'm fine. I don't say nothing to you.
Yeah.
Yes.
And go ahead. I'm sorry, Shantae.
I was just agreeing.
You having flashbacks, Shantae?
Yes, I am, but yes.
Because I was gonna say the hard part is, like what Felicia did, she did a good job of tying to the story, and Tapora, you did also. Like, if you're experiencing these situations at first, it's difficult to see like that's what it actually is. Like Felicia said, I wasn't getting hits. I noticed my profile was getting hits, but I wasn't getting called back for interviews. The moment I took the picture down, I started getting invited into interviews. So there's a direct correlation to support. I feel this way because of this. In your situation, you have this person telling you, I'm not going to get along with this person because this is how she feels about this. And then you see the results of it, right? And if you are not well versed in dealing with racism, then when it happens, you're going to just say, maybe I wasn't good enough, or maybe this, and you'll be walking around here, low self-esteem, self-doubt, imposter syndrome, or whatever they call it, because you think you're the problem, because you're not understanding that this system is failing you.
Yep.
That's the issue we have here.
Yep.
I'm gonna go to these next 2 comments, and then we're gonna get into the therapy part of it, and Shantae is gonna take the floor. So Maureen and Aries.
My issue, my thing was when I was in the military. I've always been a vocal, like, I always look at it from my subordinate's perspective instead of looking at it from mine. So when I got attacked, I never looked at it. I too looked at it like good people, bad people. Because I am mixed, although I portray a Black woman, my dad is Puerto Rican and my mom is Black. And my grandmother is Irish, green eyes, white hips, red hair. So for me, I always try to look at it from the good and bad people, because it will force me to have to split a side, right? Well, when I look at my career, like, I just realized there's just ignorance, period. And it may look like me or it may look like my grandma, but at the end of the day, they need to be held accountable. Wrong is wrong, and you need to be held accountable. And my situation, my last 2 years in the military was complete hell. I don't miss it. I'm not even excited about going back. But what I will say is that it sucks to have to go through the red tape, like I have to go get a congressional for you to do what you're supposed to do on your end. And the fact that I know I served 13 years, the fact that I know, like one of the young ladies, like, we do over and beyond, because we always look at it from if that was my child. And so, or we're looking out for the people below us. And it sucks that we have to even get in that mindset to make sure that everybody is being treated fairly. And when I look back at it, and I look, like, the spiritual aspect of it was I had to be pushed against the wall to come out fighting. And what I learned is that God graces us for the things that we go through. And sometimes we don't want to fight. Sometimes we don't want to do those things. Like, sometimes we just really want to quit. And it's the unction within us. And I always say that's the grace cushion that tells us we got this. And it sucks that we have to lean to it. And it's also a bad thing that people, will put you in a category or of saying, oh, you always run to religion, or are you just pacifying this behavior with. At the end of the day, I know what it does for me, and I know what I have to do, and I have to do my part and what I can do. And I can't fix everybody, but I can fix me. And I even have a hard time doing that. But what I can do is adjust my trajectory is adjusted and do what I'm supposed to do. So let everything else take care of everything else. But if I don't do what I'm supposed to do and line up, and if God grace me to like get that unction to go fight, I gotta go fight. Even if I don't want to, I gotta go fight. Because one thing I've learned in that fighting, I got better results with that unction of fighting than fighting when I wanted to fight because I felt like you was hurting my feelings. So when I fought when God gave me the unction versus when I fought because my feelings was hurt, it was a whole different result.
You know, you said sometimes we don't want to fight. I'm going to say most times we don't want to fight, probably all the time. We don't even want revenge, and we should, because some people do, right? Like we just want things to be fair. We just want peace. We just want like camaraderie. Like that's all we generally want. But what happens is you back us against a wall. We come out swinging, and then when we start winning, then you want to talk about how we're fighting. And it's like, but I wouldn't have been fighting if you had just let me just exist.
That part.
Aries, I'm coming to you.
I'm doing a woosah because this is the one that gets me very like,
woo.
This is the one. And like I said, I didn't realize what I was dealing with for a long time, but once I started looking back at all that, I was just like, because the imposter syndrome had got me. Like I came into the workforce, I went to college, like I'm the girl from the hood, like go get your education. That's how you're gonna get out. Like the whole nine, I did all the things that I was supposed to do. I got the MBA, the everything. I'm like, they ain't gonna be able to tell me nothing because I'm out here doing my thing. You know, like I thought I really was like the one. And I knew that I was smart. Like I knew, like I know my stuff, I'm on it, I got the experience, I'm doing all the things. And I will say, like once I came to Texas is when it became more in my face-ish. It still wasn't like the experience in Prague where it's like, no, you can't do this because you're Black. But it was like, oh, wait, they're trying to stop me from this. Like, it's obvious that I'm the one that's getting treated a certain way. I've always been a documentation person. I'm writing. I got all the notes. Kim will tell you, I got stuff from back in my first corporate job, stuff that I used to keep files for every job. This last one though was the one that really broke me. Like I felt like I had been kind of handling it. Like I had been laid off multiple times. I had started internalizing it, obviously, after a while. But this last one, where I felt like I had kind of got it a little bit, but I still hadn't all the way got it because if I did, I would have filed something on their butts when I was working there. But I had a coworker who was high school graduate, no college experience. They basically hired me to be his babysitter or to like keep him under control because they felt like I had the temperament to handle him. That was basically what it was. That wasn't the job, but they were looking for someone who could basically manage this other person that was not my subordinate. He was a peer. But we were working together it was an IT consulting firm. So I was the service delivery manager. He was the account executive. I'm actually the one winning all the deals. I'm not getting commission. You're getting the commission. So you should be happy. He just did not want me to be the one getting the credit for getting the deals. And the client loved me. I was dealing in a hostile work environment, even with the client. I mean, these are people who are known Trump supporters. I don't care. I'm just getting your money. I don't care about what you do. You know, when you're there, I'm trying to get this check, so I'm able to handle that environment. But with this person was so toxic towards me. I'm talking about to the point of like aggressiveness. Like you're talking to me crazy in the office where like you're coming to my desk. I'm sitting right here on my computer and you're like yelling at me to the point where I had to tell him, go to my boss's office, like get away from my desk. You go, anything you want to say to me, you need to say in his office. And I had repeatedly wrote to my director telling him about this person. This is the most toxic environment I've ever worked in, ever. Like it was to the point where I'm like, I'm ready to, like, I'm about to slap this fool. I'm feeling very like pressed, in this situation where like I got this man standing over me, yelling at me, and stuff. And I'm like, first of all, like, so dealing with that, and then I end up being the one that gets laid off. You know, we go into my boss's office, we deal with it. I'm thinking it's handled. It wasn't really handled, but I'm thinking like, okay, he's trying to create peace between us or whatever. This man created a whole situation basically lying on me. I'm like, I'm doing the best. I'm getting the accolades. I'm getting the kudos. They wouldn't share them with me. When the customer would send them things, they wouldn't let me see the emails. I don't have any of that, but I know that it happened because they're congratulating me, certain people, right? And then this man creates this whole lie about me, which that I think was the part that hurt the most. It was like, I had no chance to even speak for myself. Like they wouldn't even give me the opportunity to correct the lie. Like that's how it was. So when that one happened, I was like, I'm not going back into corporate. Like I was like, I'm done. I'm done. I can't do it no more. So last year I took that whole year off, but that was what sparked the Bold Black Girls podcast. Like literally we started our podcast. I got laid off December 2018. I'm also on the board of a nonprofit, DFW Alliance of Technology and Women, and that is another group that I try to integrate, basically get more Black women to join and stuff like that. But we did a panel on Black women in the workplace and leaders. These are Black women leaders at top companies who are dealing with what we're talking about right now. These are senior level executives that are talking about their experience being shut down, you know, in the workplace and things like that. And then me and Kim, you know, because of the response from that event, that's how this podcast kind of got fueled. And I did the most passionate work I ever did all last year with no, you know, real corporate job, you know, outside of my job. And that's what actually got me back into corporate. This year, I started a new job in January, but I was so adamant about the type of company I wanted to work for, the culture, the environment. And I did what you did, Tiffany. I put all my stuff on my LinkedIn. I put everything there now. They see the Bold Black Girl podcast. They see the episodes. They see everything. And I'm like this at work. I don't wear my hair straight at work. I never have worn my hair straight since I started the job. I wear it different ways every other week. I've been my whole self from the interview when I did the presentation and it's a sales role. So I had to do a full like presentation to these group of white men. And I had my podcast on there, things I like to do for fun, here, things that I put my whole personality into it because I'm like, you know what, if I'm gonna go back into this, because mentally I went to therapy over this. Like I had already kind of dabbled in therapy, but that was the one that was like I was tore up, you know, for a while after that one. So it empowered me really when I saw how much I did without the corporate job, and God sustained me financially throughout the year with no income, and the lives that were touched and the authenticity and how you living in your truth. Like literally now, guess what? At this new job, I've only been there 6 months. I've already been been requested and on calls with our CEO, senior level executives, presidents, all of them, because guess what? They want to now tap into this Black girl magic and see, oh, we need to be talking to our Black employees, you know, whatever. And I was one of the first ones that they reached out to because I'm so vocal about who I am and what I stand for. So now it's like, I'm walking in my truth. If you don't want this, then I'm not putting myself through that mental struggle any longer. Like I will never do that again.
That year that you took off, that was preparation for what you were coming to do. So I even see the same thing because right now, you know, I'm on my 4th day at my new job, y'all. I'm so excited.
Yes, congratulations.
And thank you. And I, you know, I will say, like, it's cool when you're in an environment where you could be seen for who you are. And I don't know how it's gonna be, right? It's early. So like I told them last week, I said, as much as I like this, I ain't putting this on LinkedIn yet. You know, we're dating. I'm not gonna change my relationship status until I know what I know. But if you've ever dated a person and not told them what you're looking for, and then you go out on dates and they start telling you all the things they're about, and you're like, yes. That's how I feel about the relationship. And so I'm excited about it. But everything you're saying, Aries, I think the first time you and I talked at dinner, I'm like, I see you. I know your story and I understand. So Shantae, now I'm going to bring you in, right? Because all of these situations can mess with us psychologically. Yeah. So Shantae, I want you to weigh in, if you could please, on how these situations will impact us psychologically, and then we can open it to the floor and have them to weigh in as well.
Right. So when we have that constant exposure, right, of racism, so even if we think about it now, we have social media, and social media is a gift and a curse, I believe, because it keeps us up to date in real time on things like racism, like the videos that we see of the police officers and the murders and things like that. And that's a constant kind of flow coming in on our news feed. And on top of that, we have to think about the day-to-day aspect that all of this plays, right? So we're dealing with what's happening nationwide, right? We're dealing with what's happening everywhere. Then we're also dealing with indirect and direct racism systematically in our everyday lives, at work, at school, in business, whatever the case may be. And so that is heavy, right? That is and let's not talk about your personal stuff, right? Like your personal life and things that you haven't dealt with in your past, that trauma. So we are walking around carrying a lot of stuff, and the psychological impact it has, I always say PTSD. We think PTSD is just for Army folk, right? Nah, right? We experience those same symptoms. So we're having trouble sleeping. We have an increase of heart rate. We're kind of iffy. We're fearful, or we're hypervigilant, right? All of those things come into play, and we deem it sometimes as normal, right? Like, my heart rate gets up a little every once in a while. I'm okay. Nah, that's anxiety. That's not normal, or it shouldn't be normal, I should say. And the difference, because we think of PTSD as this single thing that has happened, is one traumatic experience. But with racial stress, that is constant. We are experiencing that constantly on a daily basis. And so it may throw you into depression, anxiety. That's where you see those long-term effects. Trauma it stays in our body. We hold on to that, right? So now we're dealing with depression, we're dealing with anxiety. So we have an increase of tension, stress, high blood pressure. We have heart issues. We have all of those things that come into play because of what's happening in the world. And that's why it's super important, one, for us to be aware of ourselves, right? For you to know you and know when to rest. I was reading the comments. We have this superwoman syndrome. We got to do everything. One, because we have to, not because we want to, because if we could lay this down at the cross, we would, right? We're leaving it at the table for somebody else to carry, but we have to. And it goes back into that burden of proof. We got to prove ourselves. We got to make sure that everyone knows we can do all of these things. And that's heavy. And so when you think about these experiences, I'm curious to see in your own life, how did it shift how you showed up and moved in the world because of the racism that you experienced? So look, I'm acting like Tiffany. Let me see if I got hands. Let me see, Krista. Yeah, let's go with Krista.
Yeah, so I mentioned this in the chat, but I actually didn't articulate what happened to me as a trauma. Like the way that they blamed me. And the way that they put it on me, and they made me seem like I was unqualified, all of the different microaggressions, unspoken rules, the weird things that were said. Like, they'd come up to me and be like, if I'm ever being racist, please let me know. All of these different things manifested, and Crystal can attest to this too, because when she first met me, I was in a very, and I didn't realize it, in a very fragile place. To the point where somebody else mentioned it, it took me a year to find another job, and I really resented that, but I needed that year. Because to this day, listening to narratives, sometimes I'm even on the mic on We Are Meaningful, and I'm crying during episodes, thinking about what happened to me, and it's just because I never gave it the power that it deserved, so I wasn't able to heal the way that I needed to, right? We don't call it a trauma. We're like, they treated us bad, they let us go, whatever, that's fine, keep it pushing, that's not a real thing. But it really is such a challenge to our identity, because as women of color, our career, our success, our hustle, whatever it is, that's what provides for us and our families. That's what defines our success as individuals sometimes, right? So it was so challenged, a big part of my identity, and I never gave it the attention that it needed. So being in this new space, I'm seeing a lot of things. I'm back in corporate America and I'm noticing my triggers and I'm having to calm myself and I'm having to be like, that's not a red flag. That's just something that you've experienced from the past. It's okay. Like when somebody gives me feedback in a weird way and I'm like, are they gonna fire me? Is that what this means? Like, what is this? Right. And you have all these things and it is like PTSD because you spend most of your day having anxiety about conversations that you shouldn't have anxiety about.
Yeah.
It was chill out, Krista, but it doesn't manifest that way. So I think it had a really big impact. And to this day, it makes me hesitant to build friendships at work, right? Like I'm super sus about everybody. I'm like,
no.
You'll be like, can I follow you? Can I connect with you? Can we do this? And they like want to get real personal. And I'm like, let's not. Hold on. Let me figure you out. So like Tiffany said, this is dating. We'll see where it goes. So I think that I wish I would have called it what it was sooner so that I could have healed a bit faster and treated it the way that I needed to.
And I'm so glad you said that because we can't heal what we don't name. And a lot of times we don't, like you said, we don't see that as trauma. We see trauma as physical and sexual abuse. And we leave out emotional, right? When it's not in the context of a relationship, but of a romantic relationship, I should say. But like when we're talking about workplace, that's emotional trauma, right? That's the microaggressions. Those are all of those things. And until we're able to name that, it's hard for us to put a term on it and figure out how to heal it and fix it, because it's just like, it becomes a part of who we are. It becomes a part of that's just the Black experience, right? That's just what we go through and what we're supposed to go through. And so I'm so glad you said that, because it's super important to name it as a trauma so that you can heal it. I saw Tawana's hand is up right now. So Tawana, you want to weigh in?
I don't see Shante running this thing right now. Do y'all see my girl?
Listen, no, look, I'm a little nervous, but I got it.
So I'm going to set the scene where I am now probably 2 years ago realizing that it was a trauma, because like you just said, it wasn't something physical. I didn't realize the emotional toll it was taking on me until like I was waking up in the middle of in the middle of the night, just like thinking about things that should not be bothering me at work, because it's not a big deal. It was okay to leave work at work. Okay. So I served in the active duty Army for like 4.5 years. And then I switched to the National Guard. And it's a big change in dynamic on how they run things. So just imagine your superiors being friends with people who are not, they're like newly into a position or a job, and they're like buddies, and it's a different type of dynamic. So the discipline is not there on the same level. That's the first thing. The second thing is I went to a unit that was in Alabama National Guard. I am not only a Black woman, I am educated, and I am considered armed and dangerous, right? So I was treated as such, but I didn't necessarily recognize it because I am the good and bad people. I don't necessarily see that you are going to intentionally do something to me, even if I'm going to an Alabama National Guard unit full of white males. Okay. So at first I get there, I have the most time, active duty time in service, but I don't necessarily understand the structure for advancement. And so I don't realize that every time there's an advancement, they literally had that I would go 1 mile. I was willing to travel 1 mile for promotion, and other people they had them on for unlimited, meaning those people kept getting promoted faster than me. And it's a structure that they were doing, and they purposely doctored my paperwork so that I could not get promoted. That was the first thing. So when I started asking questions, the next month I got promoted because I was overqualified beyond all of the other people. So then I get to this new unit, same state, Alabama, but now I have to go to a deployment with them, and I go to Cuba. And because I was, again, educated and a Black woman, I am armed and dangerous. So we get there and I have to send this report And I sent this report, well, someone else sent a report before me and they didn't know what happened, but I sent a report after the person. And our commander was like, whoever sent that report, that's who you need to have in the office, because I had the capability of writing a complete sentence. That's dangerous. So we get there and I'm working this job. At this time, I've been in the military 11 years and I get 5 negative counseling statements. I don't know what to call them, but it's like they write me up 5 times in 3 months. So I'm confused and I don't know what to do about it. But they kept like jigging at me. And I was like, I didn't understand what to do because I don't feel a physical hurt. I don't necessarily know how to respond to this until one day I spaz out. I had, before this, I had went to speak to someone. I'm like, I'm not really understanding what's happening. What are they trying to do? What are they trying to accomplish? But this is affecting me like at night. I'm questioning myself. What is wrong with me? So I spaz out and now I'm the problem because I've given them what they wanted from the beginning. They didn't know how they could go so long and me never give a reaction. Okay, so I learned quickly what's happening now, and I'm putting 2 and 2 together. And now I decide I can't do this anymore. I get out, and I get into the workplace, and a different type of work. I'm out of the military now. I'm working for the federal government, but it had such a paranoia over me that I was waking up in the middle of the night trying to make sure that when this person said something to me, it wasn't like out of malice because I have such a trauma from what happened to me when I was in Cuba with these people. I have literally almost erased Cuba out of my mind because I try to suppress that feeling that it made me feel inadequate. It made me feel like something was wrong with me. I was the problem when it was never that. It was just my armed and dangerous tactics of writing complete sentences, being educated, and being a woman in a unit full of white men with, these complexes. So I am only now realizing that it had a whole lot to do with them and not me. And it has eased my work now because I did acknowledge that it was a trauma and it was not me. But that's my experience with it and how I have gradually learned it, but I could definitely use a therapist.
Because I was going to say, right? So
Yes.
a lot of times though, I think we are able to logically figure out what's our stuff and what's someone else's stuff, right? I think we have that ability to do that. However, the piece that we miss is the residual effect that even going through that experience had on us. And so a lot of times we'll get out of this situation and we'll say, okay, that was them, they was tripping, I already know what it was, let me move on, I'm just gonna find another job. But what we don't realize is we still holding on to that. We're still holding on to those emotions, those thoughts. They may not be as frequent because you're no longer in that environment that triggers you, but it's there. And so when you're faced in another situation, that's gonna be the first thing that comes to your head, and you won't be able to filter out your pain, and you're just gonna see what happened in the past. You're just going to see that trauma. So that's why therapy is important when we experience any type of trauma, because there is stuff in there that you probably don't even know is in there, and you need that other perspective, that person who can look at this thing objectively and say, hey, did you notice that when you talk about this, you have this tone, it has this demeanor, you have this, this anger kind of edge onto it, because we don't realize that. We find it, we think it's normal. So therapy is like lit.
For the record, I try to get therapy. I'm still searching for a therapist. The 2 that I've had, we are not a match. We could not.
Look, where you located? Where you at?
Which way is it? Swipe left or swipe right?
Right.
I have been listening to you, and I'm like, gosh, are you licensed? I know you said you were trying in Georgia. But
So y'all send some prayers up for your girl, because the board will be reviewing out of state applications July 10th.
Okay.
So I got my fingers crossed, like all my stuff. So we just waiting on Georgia to do their thing. I got
you. You already got it. I just want to say one thing real quick. What's funny is, 2 things. So one, I know we're at the 10 o'clock mark, so if anybody needs to drop off, I'm not offended, but I want to let the conversation kind of play out. We're almost done. So if you can stay with us, it will be wonderful. But 2, even though it's possible you could experience racism in other places, I just want to remind you of something. Like if you find a job, for instance, I worked in insurance, and insurance is a conservative, white male, white women driven industry, right? A lot of companies are, but let's just say insurance. If you're going from one insurance company to the next, it's like dating the same guys over and over and over again. So you're having your trauma reinforced because you're going into the same types of situations and you're thinking you're going to have a new experience, but a lot of times it's the same kind of people. And so it's easy for you to start taking it on and thinking it's you, but it's likely the situation you're in. So like Tawana, if you're in the military, if you go from one military base to the next, you're still in the military. So you might be thinking like, I had a problem here, I had a problem there, it has to be me. You're in the same industry, you're in the same space, so you're going to run into the same kinds of people. So be careful so you don't own things that aren't 100% you, because it's not saying you don't have anything to work on, but it's not always going to be you, and sometimes it's a byproduct of the environment you're in.
Yes, agreed. Okay, so I see another hand. We see Maureen, so we're gonna do Maureen, and then we'll move on to talk about therapy, so we can wrap up, so we can be cognizant of your guys' time. Okay, Maureen.
So what's interesting is like, suppression is kind of a natural thing to do in the military. Like if it doesn't get addressed, we kind of like keep it rolling. Take a Motrin, change the sides, keep it moving. So the thing that was interesting to me is that I remember going through issues with weight. And I went to the mental health section in the military, only to find out later that what she wrote wasn't conducive to me having any mental trauma. So as I'm going and I'm talking to her and I'm telling her like, it's making me question how I look at myself. Like I feel fat when I'm not fat. Like I can put on clothes that I would normally wear. And no matter how many times I try to lose weight, it's never enough. And I'm telling you this only to get out the military and realize that what you're documenting is, oh, she just got, it's nothing. Mm-hmm. And so when I go to get my VA lookup, do the rating and stuff, they completely said, oh, there's nothing wrong with you mentally. Now, because I have the faith that I have, I'm not pressed on it, but it's sad because I just wonder how many Private Joe Snuffies or how many Sergeant Joneses had to go through that to where I'm pouring out my heart to you every week. If I got to go to you every week to talk about this same problem, baby, that's a problem. I ain't got no degree in life coach, but I got my certificate to know if this thing keep resurfacing and I got a new story every time and it's bringing tears to where you already have the tissue on the couch, boo, that's a problem. Yeah. And so like, I used a source that was provided to me from the company, and it's just sad because who you working for? If I'm pouring out to you, who you really working for? So yeah, when I think about mental health, that was my experience of mental health to the point where they have like a 1-800 number that you call to where it's not connected to the unit, to where I had to talk to somebody where she reinforced the power, like she reinforced, you good, right? Like, don't make that. She had to help my reprogramming. Yeah. Because what this lady said, I ain't got no problem, but I was going to you every week.
That's why we matter.
That's it.
I'm honestly, when it comes to navigating racism in a therapeutic space, they didn't teach us this in grad school. Okay, we didn't have class on it. I ain't know how to do it, and we're gonna add a pandemic, and we're gonna add all this protesting, and we're gonna add, and I'm a Black woman, and I gotta navigate this, and I have Caucasian clients, right? So it's very difficult to provide like what you should do in that situation. However, that's why you seek out us. I don't want you to have that bad experience with mental health that time to no longer try it again. I think Tiffany just put in the chat, like, you're going to have to go through therapists, right? I had to go through 3 or 4 of my own before finding one that I rock with, right? My healing was more important than me just stopping, right? Because I couldn't find the right therapist. So it's super important, guys, that it's like an interview process, right? Like, you're going to go ask them therapist questions, ask them how they feel about stuff. Some will choose to answer and some may not, but you have to take the power back. I think that's what all of it's like, us using our voice. us saying when things aren't right, or us moving on. A lot of us stay places because it's just like, what? Why even try to go navigate a bigger mountain, right? Or a bigger demon, or racism that looks differently. So it's just therapy. Right? That's therapy. So I'm curious to know, for those who have experienced the trauma or experienced the inequity in different parts of our lives and went to therapy, how did it help you? If anyone wants to share. Let me see if I got some hands. I'll be forgetting.
Aries.
Thank you. Crystal.
Yeah, like I mentioned, I definitely needed it. I didn't realize how bad I needed it. But really what therapy helped me with was the lies I had believed that were not true. All these things that were not true that I had internalized and had like taken on as my problem. And they were not my problem. They were someone else's problem that I had just totally put on my back. And that's kind of why I think I kind of it just kind of came to a head at that point, because I had so much, and it went back, of course, when you go into therapy, now I'm looking back at all the times and I'm like, that was it there. That was from when I was 20 years old and I was getting, treated this way. And I'm 41 now. So 20 years of this is a lot,
Yeah.
So at that 20-year mark, I was like, you know what? I think I'm retiring from this. I'm retiring from this being my thing, and so I needed that year. I needed the therapy, I needed the time, I needed the time. What it gave me was a chance to show myself like, no, you are smart. No, this not you, because guess what? Look at all the things that you have been able. I've accomplished more in that year than I had at any of these jobs. Like it was just so many things where I'm like, whoa, like I didn't know that I could do all that. It gave me built my confidence back up to see that no, it's not you. And guess what? The same thing, I forgot who said it earlier, but it was like, I think it was Tiffany, but if you don't want me for me, like it's kind of like we say with relationships, right? It's like I'm gonna walk in my authentic self. And if you don't want this, I don't want you. Like I'm good. Like I don't want to be anywhere where I am not celebrated and acknowledged for what I'm bringing to the table. Like that says so much, especially if you're talking about in a workplace where you come in, everything about who you are is why you're bringing me in, right? You're bringing me in for what I'm bringing to the table. And guess what? Now, when I negotiate this salary, I need you to recognize what I'm bringing to the table, because when I'm talking about these coins, I'm gonna need you to put some respect on my name and these credentials and this experience that I got. You know what I mean? So, and feeling confident, that is what really makes the difference. And I learned that when I started going into this new role. It's a totally different experience. Obviously, it's a totally different company, great company culture, but the respect level that I came in at was at a whole different level based on so many different things. I'm sure based on the negotiation, based on how I presented myself from jump, all of those things. So it showed me that, wow, like that really was a big factor that, because I had shut myself down. I had got to the point where when I first got into corporate, I was vocal, I was writing memos, I was organizing things. I'm like, okay, so this is what we're doing. Like I had it going on. I'm doing things. I'm a natural leader, so I already got that kind of in me. But when all these experiences are happening, I started being quiet. I was in the boardroom sitting there not saying anything, and I knew the answers. I knew what to say, and I'd be like, I'm not gonna say that because I don't know. Do I know what I'm talking about? Am I right? Am I wrong? And then somebody would say what I was gonna say, and I'd be like, I could have said that an hour ago, whatever. So it really, therapy really made me go walk through a lot of those experiences and say, what were you telling yourself here? Why were you quiet, or whatever. And so I was able to just kind of crack that open, and really dig into it. That's the part that you guys talk about this a lot, with your platform. We do the same thing with both Black girls is personal development, right? And so that starts with that self-awareness and emotional intelligence. So you can have relational intelligence and all these other things. And so just going through that exercise that I think a lot of people probably don't want to do because it is uncomfortable. It's going to dig into spaces that you don't necessarily want to open up. It's going to go into your family. It's going to go into like how you relate in so many areas. So I definitely am an advocate, of therapy. We bring therapists on our podcast and stuff like that too, because it's like this is a real issue that if we don't, when we don't handle it, we don't handle because we got to handle ourselves. Like we can't rely on nobody else. So you got to handle yourself. So if we don't, then we will be susceptible to this, thing that is there. It's there. It's just a way that unfortunately we have to navigate through it.
Yes.
And how we could keep our sanity, while doing that. So.
Yeah, I agree. And before we get to Crystal, the thing with therapy is just providing that clarity, right? Of like you being clear about who you are. So when you're faced with something, you already know, nah, that's not, because I know who I am. I know what I'm like, nah, that ain't it, right? And when you go through therapy, it's not to say that these things will never happen again, right? Is to say that they're going to happen again, but because I'm clear about who I am, it's not going to affect me in the way that it did before, because now I'm not going to associate that with me. I know what I'm talking about. You just probably don't understand how I'm saying it, but I know what I'm talking about, right? So, okay, and then Crystal, I think she has her hand raised. Yes.
Okay, so I have very little to add after all of that. So I will say +1 to everything that's already been said. What I will say about therapy is that it helped me to recognize gaslighting and when I'm being gaslit and what's actually happening versus what someone else might tell me is happening. What I'll also mention is that therapy has taught me that I have choices. And I said this in the chat, but prior to, I didn't feel like I had any choices. I felt like I had to deal with this thing because in order for me to take care of my family, I got to do this thing. And now I realize that I don't have to do that thing. There's other things that I can be doing, and there's other places where I will feel welcome and safe and valued and respected for what I bring to the table. And then just having conversations like this with you all through the We Are Meaningful podcast has really been therapeutic for me, because it really helps me to realize that we're not the only one. So I'm not the only one who's experiencing something. Krista's not the only one, but there are other people who have and who are experiencing things, who have strategies for how to navigate.
What is gaslighting for those who don't know what that means?
So gaslighting is basically someone telling you that you aren't experiencing what you're experiencing. So they do something, you confront them about what your experience is, and they're like, no, that's not actually what happened. Are you sure that's what happened?
Yes. So I always give the example of, I read it, it's a couple, husband and wife. Husband comes home every day, the lights are on, he cuts the lights down just a little bit. Every day. Cuts it down just a little bit. And then the wife is like, is it getting darker? It's like it's getting dark in here. And he like, no, it ain't dark. Ain't nothing wrong. And so she's like, it's getting dark in here. And he is telling her no, right? So now what happens is you start to question yourself. Am I going crazy? Like, am I tripping? So that's like them making you feel like the thing that you know is happening, they're telling you it's not. And sometimes it's so obvious and it's blatant. Other times you don't know it until you're out of it, right? Until you're like, dang, that So yeah, gaslighting, that's fun.
It's real.
Yeah.
In the field. Akeisha.
Yes, ladies, I'll be quick. I was just going to share that based on the experience that I told you about when I was around 5 or 6 years old, I learned in therapy that the little girl inside of me was still hurting. Because I'm very compassionate, I care, and my heart is on my sleeve, my shoulder. And when I became an educator, it was more so, especially with the things that I told you guys that I saw before. And I found myself as an educator hurting, going home just hurting because of how I would hear other kids talk to other kids, or even educators talk to kids. And through that, I realized that what was said to me when I was 6, when I was 5, I was still holding on to that. And I never wanted anybody else to experience that hurt that I felt when those little girls told me I couldn't play with them because I was Black. So I really learned that the little girl inside of me and all of her experiences were showing up as an adult, and I needed to face that and to understand that, like you all have said before. And I'm thankful for it. I'm thankful for the experiences because it has helped me be and have the compassion that I have. But it did some things to me as a teen and as a young adult until I realized what was going on that, that happened. So.
Yeah, that's a perfect example. I always say therapy helps us deal with the little person inside of us that's hurting. And with clients, I try to teach them it's therapy. The process of it is for you to tell your little person, I got it, sis. Like, we can rest now. Like, I got it from here, right? Because it's her showing up trying to behave like a big girl, and she's not. And so it's just giving yourself the space to process through all of that and then give her permission to rest.
Yes, that's exactly what my therapist told me as well. And she would tell me, just hold whatever part of your body you just want to hold in comfort, do that. And so I would hold my belly and I would say, I got this. It's okay. You can rest. It's going to be all right.
Yes.
So thank you.
Yeah. I love this. So as we close, we've heard some really powerful testimonies and just stories and experiences from each of the women on the call who have been a victim of these unfortunate circumstances and who have had to prove beyond a shadow of a doubt their experiences. And so collectively on this call, my hope for sure, and I know I don't even have to say it, but I pray that we continue to support one another and, and highlight our own narratives and our stories and show up for one another when things like this happen, because that's the first thing, right? Coming together in community is so powerful. As it relates to the different areas, and I'm going to just give some high level points. And then if any of the women on the call want to give any additional points, you can. As it relates to education, be present. Like Akeisha said, a lot of schools and teachers and administrators don't expect minority parents to show up, right? They're thinking we're too busy, we don't have the time, we're not going to go to conferences. And so it's important for you to give your children the benefit of the doubt. And just think to yourself, like, no kid wakes up saying, today I'm going to fail. Like, I can't wait to go to school and get written up. Most kids aren't doing that, right? So if something's happening, seek to understand first what's going on, build a relationship with your child's teacher, have those crucial conversations, let them know that you are there. I know I've had educators say to me, I don't want to bother you. And I've had to correct them and say, it's never a bother when you're calling about my son. So we don't have to have that conversation anymore, to let them know I'm available, call me, we can work together and work this out. But just make sure you're present when it comes to your kids. And then for healthcare, do your own research. We've heard several stories where women are being misdiagnosed. Their symptoms are not being considered as serious or as valid. They're being questioned about what they know they're experiencing. And so the best thing you can do for yourself is to start doing some of your own research. I know Arlesia tells me don't just Google stuff because Google will have you thinking you're dying, right? But I mean, you can start to ask questions. If you have trusted friends who are healthcare professionals, ask them questions. I call my friends who are pharmacists and nurses like, hey, yo, you're my on-call nurse. So tell me this is what I got going on, who I need to go talk to, right? Send them a picture of what I have, seriously. And they help me out. But do your own research. And then when you hear something and it doesn't make sense, like Takora said, the diagnosis wasn't making sense, seek a second opinion. Don't just accept the first diagnosis you received, because imagine if she had accepted treatment for a disease or an illness that was not even what she actually had. How long would she have continued to suffer? And so it's important that we advocate for ourselves and speak up. And then one good point that I didn't know that came from this conversation is what Shantae and I think Felicia said. Make sure that you tell the healthcare professional to write in your file what they're refusing to give you, or what was the statement, Shantae?
If you ask for something or request a medication, request a test, and they say no, ask them, can you get that and document it so that you can have it on file and they can have it too. And most likely they're gonna do what you ask because they don't want nothing on paper.
Hello. As it relates to employment, I am someone who I document everything. And I hate to have to be that way. But I've just learned through the different experiences I've had in corporate that you have to document stuff just as your own safeguard. So I don't make it awkward, right? Like I'm not documenting everything and then sending you like long paragraphs, but I do open my OneNote and I keep, notes to myself about things that happened, things that are of importance or trends I'm noticing, because what I like to do whenever I have conversations about things, I like to have examples, tangible examples of on this day, this is what I experienced and this is why, and be able to tie it back to something so that I can illustrate a theme, because one time does not a trend make is what I always told myself. And so you have to see it continually. I'm not telling you to sit and just tolerate abuse or neglect or any of those things, but allow a pattern to be identified before you just call something what it is, because you could just be being triggered by some of your past experiences and jumping to a conclusion. Like an example real quick is, I know I worked at a job where this woman was trying to write me up because she was mad that I reported her for something. So like if I came back a minute late from lunch, or like if I came in like she was documenting every little thing. So the next job I had, I was like, if I stepped away from my desk, I would email my manager like, hey, I'm just going to the bathroom. And he's like, chill. Like, I don't need to know when you go to the bathroom. But I was so paranoid because I had dealt with being micromanaged to that degree. And I could have easily just misinterpreted the situation or created an awkwardness. But it's important for us to document and then partner with allies, right? Because we talk about the issues we have. And I believe the thing about this situation that's tricky is it's difficult for us to get people to hear our pain. But I believe in Crystal's example, where she mentioned the women who were with her, who stepped up and they kind of corrected the guy for sending the kid over to her. It's going to take allyship for us to really be able to start to correct some of this inequity, because we don't have the power alone to be able to defeat the structure. It's a structure and we're not a part of it. We're just victims of the structure, right? So we have to have allyship and partners who are willing to step up to the plate and help us and to advocate on our behalf sometimes when we don't have a voice, or create those opportunities where we have a space at the table. And then accept the responsibility to influence change. Because I know it feels heavy, and I believe that God is very intentional in connecting people. So all of you have been connected to us. We've all been connected for a reason. And I believe that it is incumbent upon each of us to take everything we learn and know and to use our voices and our resources to be able to affect change in our work environments, in our kids' schools, and in our communities. Like, we are the people who are going to help change what's happening right now, right? And then for life, therapy and education, we talk over and over and over again. You have to know your stuff, because once you know yourself, once you know your history, once you know things, people can't tell you what you don't know. And that might take some therapy, because you might have to do a little bit of digging and work through some stuff so that when you're met with these circumstances, you can show up the way you need to, not be explosive, but maintain your composure, not be triggered, but articulate your position, effectively. All of these things really, really, really matter in moving us forward, right? So Shantae, do you want to add something to that?
Now, just at the end of the day, take care of yourself. It is a lot. So if you need to rest. Don't let nobody, we can bully each other into not doing enough. Let's not do that. Take the time that we need for ourselves to recharge and re-energize. I've said this, I think, on another call, that this is light work, right? What's happening, protesting, right? All that stuff is light work. The real work is going to happen in those spaces that we have to be in, and we have to be okay, mentally prepared. Our spirits have to be prepared and up and strong. And so when you need to take a minute, take that minute, right? Don't allow anyone to tell you that you can't, right? We've been tired, we exhausted, and we need to rest sometimes. So take that rest, okay?
Does anyone else want to add a tip that anyone watching this live can take with them to help in any of these areas? Felicia, your hand is up.
One thing I can say is be your own biggest advocate. You know you better than anyone else. Whether you go to therapy, whether you go to God, whoever, you get your guidance from, be your own biggest advocate so you can know what you need. And so you can know where or how to seek that help. Because if you don't know yourself, you can't expect for someone to help you or to pour into you. So if you want something, speak up on it, go about it the right way, be your child's biggest advocate, because at the end of the day, nobody's going to love your child like you do. If you want something at work, do what you got to do. If you got to develop yourself, because at the end of the day, you can't depend on nobody else to promote you but yourself. So, again, that all just goes back to be your own biggest advocate and, seek help when needed.
That's right. So with that concludes the conversation. I don't know why we were so nervous, Shantae, because we did it, girl.
I told you we got this.
You ladies were absolutely phenomenal. Like, I enjoyed this conversation so much. I'm just so happy. Thank you for your vulnerability. Thank you for sharing your truth. Thank you for trusting us with your truth. I'm grateful for this call. And so we have a lot to talk about on Monday, Shantae. So what we do after the virtual connection on Mondays on Instagram Live at 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, Shantae and I come back on IG Live for So What Had Happened Was, and basically we talk about what happened during Friday's call. So that's our little tea talk time that we do on Mondays. And we hope that, if you have time, log in. If not, it'll be on our page after we're done. It's from 8 to 9. And we just recap the conversation. And if you have any points you want us to mention during the call, you can just shoot us a DM and say, hey, don't forget to mention this. We'll be happy to throw it in the conversation. And if you have any questions that we didn't answer, anyone watching, if you have questions that you want us to cover, send us in your questions. We are happy to address them as well on the IG Live. And we're going to move to our new schedule. So every other Friday is going to be the virtual connection. And we have So What Had Happened Was every Monday at 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Anything else, Shantae?
No, I love you guys and I really appreciate it. And I'm so happy that we provide this space to have conversations like this that are so healing and needed. And y'all dope. Y'all bomb. Y'all know that though.
Yes. And with that, I think we are done, ladies. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen. And that's it.
Good night, ladies.
Good night.
Thanks, everybody. Bye.
Good night.
Andrew, YouTube Live.
Do that, friends. I need to call the kid in here. How do I do it? Let's see.